It is 1 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting this afternoon. Going to begin by asking our deputy mayor to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Your Worship. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis peoples and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend these waters.
And now I just ask you to join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be declaring on the request from the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay and on 9.2A, the appointment of our Deputy Fire Chief.
Thank you very much. I see no other notice of pecuniary interest, but if it does occur to you, please bring it forward at the time. Announcements. Do we have any announcements today? Deputy Mayor Keevan.
Thank you again, Your Worship. And I just thought it appropriate to mention that a number of members of our council will be attending the Roma Conference next weekend at the Sheridan Centre in Toronto. And we have been blessed with two delegations, one to the Ministry of Infrastructure and the other to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, where we will be requesting financial support for a wastewater expansion. And we know probably every other community will be requesting the same thing, but we'll keep our fingers crossed and we'll do our best.
No other announcements. Mr. Smith, do you have any on behalf of staff?
The only announcement that I've got today is to welcome a number of new staff who are with us. We have 3 in the room and 1 who is not. Over to my left-hand side, Ryan Elliott is our new facility tradesperson. Many of you will know Heather Ann Hansen, who's been with the library for many years, but is now working as the municipality's customer service clerk. And we'd like to welcome Delaney Mitchell, who's our new communications and customer service clerk. Not here today is Chris Kazarian, who's the new mechanic in transportation and fleet services.
Welcome. We'll move ahead then to public participation. Members of the public are always encouraged to provide council with their comments and questions. Presentations must be prearranged with legislative services before the agenda is released and are limited to 10 minutes. If a member of the public wishes to make a deputation on items on the council agenda or to ask a public question, they may do so either in person at the council chambers or remotely via Zoom, phone, or internet. Members of the public wishing to make a deputation or ask a public question must register in advance with legislative services by 10 in the morning on the day of the council meeting. And you can do that by contacting the deputy clerk at meaford.ca or calling 519-538-1060 extension 1100. An email with access information will be sent to those who register for remote participation. Deputations are limited to 5 minutes and public questions to 2 minutes. And the public is also able to view these meetings live via the Municipality of Meaford's YouTube channel, www.meaford.ca/YouTube. So we do have some presentations today. And first I'm going to call on Rosalind Morrison of the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay to speak to us. Rosalind, welcome. And Margaret is going to turn the microphone on for you there.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I know a few of the people in the room and looking forward to meeting more. I am Rosalind Morrison, and I am the volunteer chair for the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay. I'd like to thank you, first of all, for your support in previous years for our programming. A recap of what we're able to accomplish with your support and other municipalities and businesses and individual residents across the region will be in our newsletter, which will be published this week. And if you're not currently subscribed to our newsletter, it's easy to do at our website at www.tisgb.com. Today, my board colleague, Dale Bedell, is joining me, and others are involved online. And today we are requesting from Meaford to invest $10,000 and become a key municipal partner sponsor in our regional collaborative programming for 2024. Some of you may not be familiar or overly familiar with the Institute, as we're relatively young. So I'd like to share some background with you and highlight some recent achievements in a slide presentation. Next slide, please. The Institute is a unique organization that brings together residents and municipal, business, nonprofit, and philanthropic leaders from across the region to connect, share knowledge, and nurture collaborative partnerships to accelerate progress on some of our most pressing issues, as well as some exciting opportunities. We're a volunteer-run, not-for-profit think and do tank with over 700 newsletter subscribers. Our board and our design teams collaborate with residents and leaders across the region. We contribute thousands of hours of volunteer time, address some of the challenges and opportunities we collectively face, like social needs, environmental impacts, and new ideas for a vibrant economy. And we work collectively towards building a resilient, equitable, and sustainable Southern Georgian Bay. We do three important things. As I mentioned, we connect people across the region and build key relationships and trust for working together on things we've never done before. We share knowledge through our learning opportunities, convening community conversations and events, and through our newsletters and the reports we publish. And through this process, we nurture collaborative initiatives by aligning objectives, developing multi-sector partnerships, and by investing in initiatives together. Next slide, please. Our vision is to harness the power of people and place in Southern Georgian Bay. And the three things that I just mentioned are how we achieve this mission. Next slide, please. Our four priority areas are all interconnected. They include achieving sustainability through a greener economy, social finance, and the positive impact it can have on building more affordable housing, business and innovation, and Southern Georgian Bay Regional Arts Network. Next slide, please. Notable achievements that we've been able to make with your support over the last year is that we've increased community engagement by 30%. We've expanded regional participation across 6 municipalities. And we're growing the engagement of leaders in major sectors, business, government, not-for-profits, and philanthropy. Our in-person and virtual events are recorded, and you can find them on our website in the events section. We had last year our March Regional Strategy Session, which many of you participated in. 2 spring events around housing. We launched our 18-month project, the Southern Georgian Bay Affordable Housing Toolkit, which is a great learning kit for any municipality who's launching an affordable housing group. Then we learned more with the Ottawa Community Land Trust about housing affordability and what they're doing with land trusts. In October, we had Achieving Sustainability through a Greener Economy. And in November, right here in Meaford, New Ways to Finance the Housing Affordability Gap, held in beautiful Meaford Hall. Next slide, please. Our ask is to invest in helping to move the Institute from a startup organization to an ongoing enterprise for this important collaborative programming. With your $10,000 investment, we can continue to keep our events free and accessible for all and help support municipal committees, working groups, and task forces in these priority areas. We can continue to support our learning groups and network building across the region. and these funds will match the philanthropic and business support we are raising for this multi-sector work. Next slide, please. Our 2024 programming goals is to do a deeper dive into understanding the ecosystem required to help finance the kind of rental housing we need to support our local workforce. We are having an event happen in Meaford Library this Friday to begin mapping out that process. We're exploring a regional model for a sustainability green economy hub in our region. We're going to be featuring more triple bottom line businesses, new kinds of businesses that are looking at social, environmental, and economic impact, like social enterprises and B corporations. And we want to learn how we can nurture more across the region. This kind of business and innovation cuts across all priority areas. Next slide, please. Your investment will help us support our local sustainable economy by hiring local talent, using local services, and securing local venues. It helps pay for communications, virtual and live events, newsletters, website, and social media. And our collective work together expands community engagement and enables residents and leaders to learn together, to co-create the programming, align our objectives, and develop collaborative initiatives for greater impact. Next slide, please. The Institute provides a unique role in the region by offering a platform and growing network for accelerating action on our common issues. Residents and business, government, nonprofit, and philanthropic leaders are convened to help build a resilient, equitable, and sustainable Southern Georgian Bay. We're all facing complex issues, and no one sector or municipality can address them on their own. And we're delighted to have a growing number of municipal council members and residents participate in our programming. We look forward to having many more of you participate, and we hope that the municipality of Meaford will invest in this important opportunity and collaborate with us. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Are there questions around the horseshoe? Councillor Bartley?
Thank you very much for your presentation, and the one you did at the Meaford Hall was phenomenal. Can you tell me who has bought into your program so far in the other municipalities?
Well, we're just beginning our deputation work. The town of the Blue Mountains has put an item into their draft budget, and we've got deputations lined up for the other municipalities.
Councillor Greenfield?
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Morrison. Just want to go back to one of your quotes. Helping to finance the kind of rental housing we need to support our local workforce. Wow. Are you making any progress on that very difficult issue?
So this national issue is one that takes a lot of learning. So we have to carve out the learning time and the strategizing time and put it into our day timer. And that's all of us who are interested and are getting involved in learning how to do more. So the first thing that we need to understand is what is the data that is available in each municipality that can identify the labor force scale in terms of what people are making and cross-reference that to what would it take to build something that these people can afford. And so the national definition of affordable housing is 30% of gross household income. So looking at the labor force in this particular region, there are many thousands of people who are making between $15 and $25 an hour. So that translates to having a rental unit that is available at $1,000 a month. This is the biggest challenge the whole country is facing. And so we have to figure out, how do we insert different tools and municipal concessions and create the pro forma that can begin to understand how we take the price point of what's current market rates down to that affordable scale. So that's the job, Councillor Greenfield, and it's not for the faint of heart, but we all have to get involved.
for that. Yeah, it's a question everyone's asking, and unfortunately, no one has the magic answer. But I was just wondering, it doesn't. I was wondering if your long range had any specific projects in mind in this
Range. So
Okay,
one of the
that's even better.
projects, yeah, thanks for that clarification. One of the projects that we have is working with the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto to take available data that is being put together by the University of British Columbia. The acronym for this kind of work is HART, and what it will be providing all of us is the cross-referencing of that affordability matrix we were talking about. So in the municipality of Meaford or Clearview or the Blue Mountains, how much of the labor force is making between, as an example, $15 and $25 an hour. Therefore, how many units do we need? And then we need to do the exercise of going through and saying, okay, if we insert a number of example, social finance tools like a community bond where everybody can put their investment dollars into to provide quick capital to do these kinds of projects, that takes the price point down. Or are there philanthropists or municipalities that have surplus land? That takes the price point down. If we opened up a community land trust and began to think about how do we do this from a non-market perspective, not-for-profit perspective, that takes the price point down. All of that pre-work has to happen. And that's part of the short-term solution finding and making. That's the work that we need to do together.
Councillor Yurg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Roz. Great presentation. And I just wanted to say thank you for the great work that the Institute has done, because having attended a number of the forums, it is a very valuable. I only would like to say that I would encourage people who maybe do not know about your organization to get involved. I think what your group does in supporting advocacy, governmentally, non-governmentally, private sector, utilizing all the tools available, I think it's really, really well done and very, very valuable. So I would just encourage anybody that hasn't seen the toolkit, hasn't seen some of the resources that are available, to look those up, because they can be very valuable in moving forward and determining some of these solutions. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I just have one myself, Rosalind, and that is, is the ask the same dollar amount from each of the municipal?
Yes.
It is. It's not on a per capita basis, but it is on a per.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Our next presenter is Kimberly Rogers and Scott Gooch, representing Christmas on the Bay.
Thank you. I'm going to hand this bag actually. It's there for everyone to hand around. I'm going to speak. Actually, we're not going to do the slide presentation. After I looked at 542 pages that the Circle and Horseshoe has to read, I thought I'll do the highlights and move over from there. If there's any questions surrounding the survey, vendorship, etc., Scott's here to answer them. Christmas on the Bay submitted an overview of the event, highlighting the key statistics, community involvement, collaboration, and the positive impact the market had on both residents, visitors, and economic development. Christmas on the Bay 2023 was a resounding success, drawing in a staggering attendance of over 9,400 people, an increase of 46% over last year. The event showcased a vibrant market, the annual Christmas parade, tree lighting, community programs, shops, people, and all things Meaford. These activities were spread across various locations, Market Square, the Meaford Hall, with notable participation with over 1,200 attendees engaged in activities and tailored events for all ages at our local library. Community, collaboration, and partnership. A hallmark of this year's Christmas on the Bay was a remarkable 28 community collaborations, 23 partnerships that significantly enriched the event, along with 32 sponsors. One, Clark, I believe, sitting at the back, I encourage all of you and the community in this room to go on to christmasonthebay.ca and really look about who our community partnerships are and who our sponsorships are and community collaborations. We had 98 on-site volunteers. Christmas on the Bay is a 12-month endeavor, Scott. No, we're not married, but we feel like we should be at times. It's 12 months of hard work, we want it to remain a free event. So everything from grant writing to initiating activities in the downtown core. We had 98 on-site volunteers, including the Meaford Hockey Club, who generously donate their time every year to keep this seamless execution of the market. The most remarkable feedback we had from the volunteers was they had fun. Some of the highlights of this year's market, there was 12 Christmas trees decorated in a diversity forest throughout the market, representing 12 different ethnic, cultural, and social work or social groups. 600 Meaford Rotary Georgie cookies were decorated by 150 children. 60 attendees learned the First Nation stories of animal origins of lacrosse. 30 handcrafted cards were created and provided to adopt a senior program. 11 local businesses participated in the scavenger hunt. Over 60 participants joined in Georgie's room for a variety of fun and activities. 100 resource bags with information from 15 organizations and agencies were distributed throughout the event, inclusive of Georgian Bay Community School secondary learning students. A shareable welcome banner consisting of 50 languages, including Braille, and a shareable pictograph board of communication that's shareable, and that's thanks to the bursary that we received here. Some highlights of economics. 56% of our survey respondents came from outside of Meaford. This equation equals return visits, shopping in Meaford, shared experience. That equals improved economic growth and support. But it doesn't end there. Over $115,000 reported sales happened in that market over 4 days. Shared event dates, Country Girl Christmas market shoppers wandered around town and in through the market. Philanthropy and charitable contributions. Christmas on the Bay is a platform for generosity and giving. A total of $665 was donated to the food bank from our Christmas tree sales. This reflects the give back to community and highlights Christmas on the Bay's commitment to making a positive impact at home. A third of Meaford's business believed that they had more customers during the market days. We highlighted a candy cane lane that worked from the blue or gray heron all the way down to the Dairy Queen. Thank you, Scott. Made some wooden signs. Jess and Grace worked with the entrepreneurs and shop owners to make sure that we were highlighting the stores in town. In concert with Meaford Culture Foundation, 4 days of jam-packed entertainment on the live outdoor stage, coupled with featured vendors, artists, authors in the terrace room throughout the market. Really, there was something there for everyone. Local businesses, organizations, and community groups came together and was truly an inclusive and diverse celebration. On a notable collaboration with the Optimist Club of Sydenham, resulting in a featured cultural cuisine stall offering international foods. This not only added a unique cultural dimension to the event, but also underscored the strength of community partnership. Additionally, the event had 17 vendor stalls, 2 food trucks, and the Straw Hats team created an experience in their Milner's Tavern. Mulled wine on cold nights, need I say more? This partnership exceeded our expectations with Straw Hats. Who featured the Christmas on the Bay event, as well as Meaford, on an oversized billboard along 26. The equation here is economic development. Without direction, they committed to building tourism, shopping, and Meaford was a welcoming roadmap to our future. A dedicated afternoon to Georgie Presents. Our inclusive initiative, Georgie Presents, took center stage on the opening day on Thursday. This showcased the event's commitment to ensuring that COTB continues to be accessible, free, welcoming, and enjoyable for everyone, irrespective of age or ability. The initiative received positive feedback and appreciation from attendees, reinforcing the importance of creating events that are welcoming to all community members. We as a board are dedicated to working alongside our community groups to minimize barriers and enhance inclusion. To that end, our DEI director in Meaford Zone, Mary Solomon, is actively preparing a welcoming space audit, a document that will hold us at Christmas on the Bay accountable in evaluating diversity, equity, and inclusion. We plan to share this valued educational file and at present are researching grant dollars and sponsorship to create a training sharing seminar. This training session is in the works for this coming year and will be accessible to community members, partners, municipality, volunteers. And we're excited to be providing the leadership for DI and events. Christmas on the Bay has been invited to participate, this is to me pretty major, to the accessibility of festival and events for Canadians with Disabilities Research Project, a project conducted by Independent Living Canada. The purpose of this work is to paint a picture of the experiences that people with disabilities have at festivals and events. This will inform future standards of the Accessible Canadian Act. Meaford will have a voice on this. In conclusion, Christmas on the Bay, it's not about encircling only community spirit or volunteerism or vendor sales. We remain dedicated and challenged to improve economic benefits within the municipality of Meaford. Through the collaboration of volunteers, local businesses, the municipality, and community organizations, we all play a pivotal role to make this happen. Starting can be difficult, but we have a roadmap into the future, and COPT asks are about collaboration, conversation, and development. 9,400 attendees is a beginning. Growth is our future. In consideration and conversation, downtown lighting. Christmas on the Bay not only attracted an Instagrammable moment before and during and after, thank you, Scott, for doing that sign, it became a welcoming stop in the heart of Meaford and a great indicator for needed street lighting. Attracts more visitors. Festive lighting can create a warmth and welcoming atmosphere that encourages people to stop and shop in our downtown area. This can lead to increased foot traffic and sales for our local businesses. Promotes local businesses. Downtown lighting can help draw attention to local businesses, encourage people to shop locally, and this helps our local economy and can create jobs. Increased property values. A well-lit downtown area can make the area more attractive to investors and developers, which can lead to increased property values and more investment in the area, economic development in the area, and the support of a local community. Grants, sponsorship, stakeholders, fundraisers, a joint campaign. Let's light it up. A doable objective for our 150th celebration. In collaboration with Main Street Market Square Plans, and Scott and I are having full conversation, everything Main Street this Friday with Rob Voigt, inclusive of stage with event partners like MCF, the Meaford Film Festival, Summerfest, local artists. This conversation needs to keep going. In consideration and conversation with the municipality, increased digital signage for Christmas on the Bay before, during, and after. Rental cost consideration of decrease, a collaborative plan and discussion of generating dollars and in-store visits to get people up past Station Hill. Land and a place to park, a needed C-can for us to store. We want to keep this event free, and that's a piece that we need to have discussion with the municipality. COTB remains excited to work in concert with our community partners, the municipality, and as a dedicated volunteer board, along with our volunteers, sponsors, and partnerships, we look forward to building on this joint success in the future. We thank you so much for your continued support and are excited about 2024.
Thank you, Kimberly. Are there any questions for her from council? Deputy Mayor Keaveney.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I just wanted to take a moment to congratulate you, Kimberly and Scott. Thank you for being here, for sharing this very thorough report with us. It's so professionally done. Christmas on the Bay was absolutely fantastic this year. It was a joy to attend. Yes, my wallet was smoking and that's a thing. And we just so much appreciate all of your efforts in bringing this economic impact to Meaford. It is so positive. And recognizing that you spoke to our Christmas decorations downtown, and I think you know that's a little bit of a passion of my own, and more to come on that front. You talked a little bit about growth being your next step, and I wonder if there's anything you can share with us, if there's anything you can give away at this point as to where you see the market heading. Might we see more booze next year?
I'm going to pull Scott in. So just about growth within the market and outside. I'll let
Yeah, sorry, I
Scott speak to
don't hear
that.
much. Yeah, so Christmas on the Bay, we're growing it. We want to enhance the enchantment quality within the market, more lighting, enhance the stage, ideally add more vendors. But really to be a key success, Christmas on the Bay can't be a destination in of itself. So we bring in 9,400 people this year. That's wonderful. 6,500 last year. But we want to make sure they're not coming just to Market Square, that they're visiting the entire downtown and ideally beyond. And the way to do that, if you look at other Christmas markets that are successful across the world, is we have to ensure that the whole downtown is part of it. And partnering with Meaford Public Libraries worked really well. Last year, they got a record 640 visitors during that weekend, and this year, 1,200. And it's kind of like our satellite to Market Square. The other end of the anchor is the Meaford Public Library, but it's the space between. So again, that's working municipality, working with the chamber for outside the downtown and working with Main Street Meaford. So collectively, obviously I cannot and we cannot build everything that goes on in all these places, but like we have with the public library, we discuss, we coordinate, and where possible, we reinforce. And we want to take the same approach downtown. So right now we're just in our budgeting phase and planning phase for next year. What we know we want to do, but what can we afford to do? And that's a bit iterative, but right now we want to increase ideally by at least a couple of vendors down at the market. We want to increase the quality of the stage, make it more comfortable for performers and more beautiful to look at. And again, just increase that overall enchantment experience with lighting and maybe some furnishing features within that Market Square. And that's where we're headed right now.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Kimberly. Thanks, Scott. I don't have a superlative positive word that can describe Christmas on the Bay. You folks have done an absolutely wonderful job, an amazing job. Thank you so much for your efforts. And to me, I mean, we went through the slides and there were a couple of suggestions. Maybe this could be done or this couldn't be done. But as far as I'm concerned, you're doing everything 110%. I really appreciate your reaching out to diversity. You're emphasizing diversity, and I think that is so important in today's world. And I think that can be a cornerstone for not only attracting local and semi-local attendance, but also from say 2-3 hours away. I think I think that is a great emphasis. As far as the library was concerned, Councillor Ford and I sit on the library board, and I know I felt a huge amount of enthusiasm down at the library certainly from the library staff and the people who dropped in, that they were involved in Christmas on the Bay. They were a block away from the village, but they were a part of it. And that type of thing, to me, that's an example of it can spread to other areas in Europe. It may take a bit of effort, but if you get in the game, I think it's gonna it'll pay off. I just want to mention Christmas on the Bay. I want to go back to the Apple Harvest Craft Show. We have two amazing presentations in our urban area within 9 weeks. And I think that's something that our municipality has to start advocating, selling more. We've got a lot of good things here in the fall of the year, and let's keep growing on them. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to ask anything? I just would like to thank you, Scott, for your very kind letter, and just to reinforce that the municipality is solidly behind what you're doing, and we appreciate that you appreciate the cooperation you got from our staff in particular in making a lot of things happen on a timely basis. So just continue to count on us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, deputations on agenda items, and we do have one. Mr. Howard Outerbridge, I assume is participating remotely. I don't see him here.
Yes.
Can you hear us, Mr. Outerbridge?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Calling Mr. Outerbridge.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I'll just take a second to say he is deputing on item 9.2C, and just for the benefit of the audience, that is the recommendation from staff is that Council of the Municipality of Meaford approve Part 3 of the heritage permit for 141 Syke Street North as presented in the as-built drawings, with the condition that the brickwork be replaced where it was removed on the rear facade in a manner that matches in composition, design, texture, color, and craft work to the original as appropriate and practicable. Are you there, Mr. Outerbridge?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for your time. I received the report, the staff report on Friday, and I got a chance to review it, put together an email to send to each of you. I'm just going to sort of reiterate that or read it back now. I've had an opportunity to review the staff report for today's council meeting. There's just a few points that I need to emphasize, which I outlined adamantly at the November 29th Heritage Committee meeting when I was asked about restoring the brick facade on the rear of the building. And I'd like to add some relevant context to the Heritage Committee's request and address, the issue in the staff report. For a little bit of background here, the weight of and the unsafe conditions of the rear wall brick cladding was my initial reasoning behind removing the brick from the rear of the building and up the sides 12 feet on either side of the building towards Syke Street. This facilitated raising the rear ground floor of the building to a level state. The foundation was shored up with piers on the inside of the building. The rear of the building was jacked up and leveled during structural work prior to the Heritage Committee's, prior to a permit being requested by the Heritage Committee, and was covered by my original building permit. That was March of 2021. My original plans showed an addition to the rear of the building where the deck now sits, which would have included in the construction of a new foundation, repairing the existing rubble foundation on the outside to support the new addition. My original demeanor with the Heritage Committee reflected my optimism at the outset of the renovation process. Initial meeting in March or April of 2021. The side brick on the building was replaced and returned around 4 feet across the back, or a return of 4 feet across the back on both sides of the rear wall as the plans originally showed. I did have the best intentions entering into this renovation and dealing with the Heritage Committee until the realities of building during COVID. My cost overruns, the financial limitations all entered into the equation, and I had to amend my plans for the renovation and rethink all aspects of it. This was just after the Heritage Committee meeting of June 2021. At that time, the outstanding issues were my color palette. The Heritage Committee preferred white. I wished to do black. The cladding on the ground floor addition, which at that point was not an issue to replace the brick. The railings on both the front and the rear on top of the addition to be period correct, and that the brick was requested to be replaced above the addition. All aspects that were reasonable at the time. With the change in my all of the requests that the Heritage Committee made as far as replacing brick and so on in June of 2021 referenced the initial plans and conditions that would have existed had the addition been added. The request for brick cladding was a single floor above the garage, and also the cladding on the side of the building. Again, neither one were an issue at that moment. The interior work continued on the building through early 2022. Midsummer, I began meetings with the building department, and they outlined a need for revised plans and engineer's report, 2 of each, which were supplied. This delayed work through until April of 2023. And I take full responsibility for portions of that, to get all the required inspections were done. I approached the building department and submitted my revised plans of November 2022 to representative of the Heritage Committee and the planning department in June of 2023. I indicated that the plans had changed, presented copies that included new drawings of the deck, and was very clear at that moment, or that point in time, that I was beginning to complete the work in earnest for a completion date of September 15th. I requested at that time the earliest possible opportunity to meet with the Heritage Committee. The first opportunity for that was September 13th, and I was given a couple of hours notice for that particular meeting. All of this work has passed inspections. Permits were granted for the deck. All of the work essentially inspections have been done, passed and paid for. At this particular time, contrary to the sort of notation of it being a reasonable expectation that this brickwork be replaced now for 2 floors, it's not feasible to replace the brick on the rear of the building. The exterior rubble foundation would need repair, which was not done because a deck was being added as opposed to an addition. The extra weight that would be indicated by 2 floors of brick onto the external foundation, rubble foundation, in its current condition is the foundation wouldn't support it. I'm proposing that it's not a reasonable requirement in this instance. The circumstances, both logistical and financial, make this an impossibility for me. The renovations completely exhausted my resources, mentally, physically, and financially. The building is complete. I take full responsibility for the mistakes made and miscommunications here with the Heritage Committee, but I'm simply looking for a reasonable, measured approval of the outstanding permit moving forward.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm wondering if staff has any questions for Mr. Utterbridge at this point, or any? No. Okay, thank you again for participating today.
Thank
Are
you
there
for
any?
that.
Are there any public questions? Seeing none, are there any council inquiries? Deputy Mayor Keaveney.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have one for Mr. Smith. I believe it was last October when council was anticipating the cemetery master plan, and I just wondered if there was any update as to when we might see that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it was in the fall, and this is one that just hasn't quite got to the top of the queue yet. I'm expecting us to see it within the next couple of months at the very latest, and we'll have it before the new season starts at the cemetery.
Councillor Uhrig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Mr. Smith, regarding this is a little ahead because correspondence is coming later, but it relates to the winter planter boxes correspondence we received which then translates to a larger conversation about snow removal in the downtown core in general. Just wondering, the feasibility of maybe increasing or what's the word I'm looking for, increasing or decreasing the level of snow that needs to be considered for removal, that may help kind of alleviate some of these situations. I know it is a shame because in one way they're trying to beautify the downtown core, but I fully understand the ramifications that requires of obstacles for snow removal. Having said that, we've had many comments about snow removal downtown. So the feasibility of actually lowering that requirement from present, I would consider bringing a notice of motion later to implement that.
This goes very firmly under the category of anything's possible. Right now, council has passed a level of service that says, and I'm going to be corrected when I'm wrong as I look to my left, I think it's once we go over a meter of snow, there's 72 hours after the snow has finished, the snow banks are there. That's something council adopted, I think, in 2021. That level of service could be worse or better. Obviously, there's some budget implications of that, especially when we're trying to do it in the midst of multiple snow events in a row. But yes, totally doable if council wishes.
Any other inquiries from councillors? So we'll move on to item 8, tabling the 2024 budget draft. And I'm going to turn it over to our interim CAO, Mr. Smith, for his presentation. Or I'm sorry, we may very well want to hear from our treasurer as well.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I knew there'd be one somewhere. So yes, one of the big moments of every year, this is the introduction of the 2024 draft budget. As we do every year, we've tried to put together a budget package today to give council and the public a good chance to have a look at that and hit some highlights during this presentation. The intent is that we talk today in more general terms and some process related things and not get really too much into the detail of the budget. We've got 2 budget days or up to 3 budget days coming up in the next couple of weeks when we'll have lots of chance to get into the real detail of each of the departments. So what we're looking at today is a fairly high level overview. We've tried to put together something to try and give everybody an understanding of where we're at and how we got to where we're at. And so this slide just talks a little bit about how we put the budget together. For the last 6 or 7 years now, we've been putting a 1% tax increase dedicated to increasing the roads capital funding, a 1% tax increase dedicated to bridge and structure capital funding, and a 0.5% tax increase for facilities. That's all been included in this budget, along with a cost of living salary adjustment of 1%, which of course is what council's policy is, that we will start at 1%. So we get a number into the budget and then council will have the opportunity to look at that as they wish. I also just wanted to highlight that, and as we do every year, but I think particularly this year, as we're very aware of cost increases and we're very aware of some of the challenges that members of our community are facing, we really have looked at ways to mitigate cost increases wherever we can. In some places, that's by changing some of the things that we do internally. In other places, that's looking at some alternative funding or ways to phase in cost increases in an effort to try and make sure that this is a budget that's achievable. I do just want to talk briefly about a bit of what may be seen as a technical difference, but I think it's really important. And I want to talk about whether things are a budget increase or a tax increase, because they are generally slightly different. Through the majority of this presentation, anytime I'm talking about the budget changes, it is that's changing. So a percentage budget increase does not translate to the same amount of a tax increase. And that's because of growth in the community, where we see that every year. And it depends on how much growth, how many new builds and how many assessment increases happen in the community as to how much of an effect that growth has. But I finally think that I understand how this works because our poor finance team had to sit me down and talk about this endlessly to try and get me to bang my head against this particular brick wall. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that for council and for the public who are watching as well, because what I came to realize, and I think perhaps we haven't done the best job of explaining in the past, is that there really is two different types of growth. And so we have to think about them slightly differently. The first is what I've called anticipated growth. And so that is money that is actually in the budget. It's additional revenue that we have put in because it's what we expect to get in additional assessment and additional tax income next year. That's always a bit of an estimate because we don't know when MPAC will assess things. We don't know how fast certain properties will be redeveloped or when things will come onto the tax base. Some we may get taxes from February onwards, some we may only get taxes from November onwards. So we estimate it based on a 3-year average of what we've seen as that additional income over the last few years. So because that's an estimated revenue, that cuts down the amount that we need to raise from taxes to cover the rest of the municipal budget. So that is already included in there and reduces the amount of the budget increase. The other type of growth is what I'm calling actual growth. And this was the growth that we realized last year in 2023 and went on to that supplementary levy line in last year's accounts. That new revenue, new assessment that occurred in 2023 is now part of the base assessment in 2024. So the tax revenue from those properties isn't included in the budget yet because it's just part of the general tax levy. And when you look at the tax section of the budget, you'll see that there's a big revenue gap for general taxes because we don't put that in till we've balanced the budget, till we know exactly what it's going to be. So that additional assessment value gets included in the weighted assessment value calculation that we make the taxes from. And so that means that the total levy that we need is then divided by a larger total assessment. And that means that there is that budget increase is spread amongst more properties than it used to be. And so that means that the tax increase is less than the budget increase whilst we're growing. Does that even kind of make sense? Good. We will come back to actual numbers in a little while later because I think that might make life a little easier as well. You have a budget book in front of you. I will say that it is not quite the budget book we intended. We've had some software challenges from our supplier who was supposed to bring something a little prettier together, but you have all of the information. And so hopefully we can make that work. And if we can manage to put together the more attractive, comprehensive book before the end of the process, we will do. I just wanted to highlight a handful of things that are included in that may make it look slightly different from in previous years. In a couple of cases, to try and simplify things, we've combined what we call cost centers. Each of those pages is a cost center. And for some reason, we're not entirely sure why, traditionally we've had a Treasury expenses cost center and a Treasury revenues cost center. We've merged those together into one Treasury cost center. Similarly, we've taken the Meaford Hall admin account and the Meaford Hall performance account and combined them into one, because then that means that we have to do a lot less chargebacks between the two, and it's a lot easier for staff, council and the public to understand what our real cost of running that facility is. We've also added cost centers for municipal drains, because as you know, we've started to have the process for our first municipal drain, and so there are costs being incurred and a small revenue as well. There's a new cost center for the interior pump storage project, because we're incurring expenses related to that, and one for the facility at 87 Stewart Street, because those maintenance costs for that building had been tucked away inside the compost budget before, and that building isn't used for composting anymore, so it should be somewhere else. Another bit that has confused me for years, and you may well not be confused by this at all, and it might just be me, is that in the operating budget, you see lines all over the place called contribution to reserve fund. In general, that line that says contribution to reserve fund is the cost of the capital projects that you're considering separately. This is done in this way for an accounting purpose because we have to show the total budget need that includes the capital projects, but we don't list each of the capital projects as individual lines in the roadways budget, for instance. We just say contribution to reserve fund under roadways is the total amount that we need for all of the road-based capital projects. If council chooses to change the projects, then that number in that line will be reduced accordingly and balance everything out to zero. Finally, you'll see in there that project management costs for those capital projects are shown in the operating budget as cost charge PMO, Project Management Office. That's again so that we have a complete number that when we're looking at the bottom line, but those costs have been taken into account when we've been calculating the capital budget and capital budget increase, because it's important that we reflect the project management costs of our staff in our capital budget. One additional note that you may not have seen before, because this is an automatically generated report out of some software, there are some blank lines there. There are lines that have a title but don't have any numbers in any of the 5 columns that you've got on the page. That's because they're codes that we used to use, maybe as recently as 2021 or 2022, but they've not got anything in there for 23 or 24. So they just sit there until we delete them all a little bit later on. Within the budget book, you'll see that we've got 2023 budgets and actuals, the proposed 2024 budget, and estimates for 2025 and 2026. Those are very much estimates. Obviously, we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the years ahead, but it's important that we show where we think we're heading. Also important to note that the actual figures for 2023 are not final. It may feel like they should be because we're in January of the following year, but there are still a number of year-end transactions and reconciliations that still have to happen. So they're a fairly decent estimate, but they're certainly not exact. The one place I really want to highlight that is for the investment income. I know Councillor Bartley will have seen that number and gone, wow, that's amazing. What can we use that for? Unfortunately, that investment income, a lot of that has to be allocated out to the various reserves that the investments have come from. So that number will not be as high as it is once we get to the year end. Within the budget book, we've grouped the cost centres together by their department based on our current interim structure. So all of the parks and recreation accounts are sat within the operations budget and not within the community services one. But this year, what we have managed to do is show it as year-on-year budget changes reflected on that structure. So just because we've moved parks and recreation from one department to the other doesn't mean community services has gone down 30% and operations has gone up 40%. You should be able to do comparisons between the two because we've treated it as if those cost centres were in those departments last year as well. With that, let's talk about the budget itself. And I know that this first line is the one that everybody wants to see the most. So here it is. According to this draft 2024 budget, the total tax supported levy increase is estimated initially at 5.75%. That includes that 2.5% for capital increases. The total tax supported levy, $18,545,150. And all of this works out to an operating budget of 2.29% and a capital increase of 15.17. That 15.17 includes 2 different reserve transfers for other capital work. So it includes $200,000 for the payment for the fire truck that we bought last year, and it includes $150,000 for a future splash pad replacement project. As both of those are very clearly about capital purchases, I wanted to make sure that they're included in this particular number. The second line might be a little confusing, but I wanted to point out that because we add 2.5% just for capital every single year, which works out to around about $400,000, that would automatically increase the capital budget by 11.5%. So although 15.17 seems like a ridiculously high number, we have a fairly high baseline in the first place anyway. So in that funding of $18.5 million, what is included? As I say, there's the 1% COLA increases built into that. The Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, or OMPF funding, is in there. That has increased by around about $50,000 this year. This is the first year that this has actually been based on a formula to do with our assets, and ours has increased, whereas lots of people's has decreased. So that's a good sign. It includes 2024 Ontario Community Infrastructure Funding, OCIF, a policing contract cost increase of only 13,000. The per household amount has actually decreased this year for I think the second year in a row, which is great. And it includes the full year cost of the additional positions approved last year for 2023. You may remember that when we added positions in transportation and parks and in the facilities division, we budgeted those from May of that year because we knew that we wouldn't have people in post. And so this year's budget includes those for the full year now that they are here. Every year we have to make some assumptions because we don't know what is going to happen. In some cases, that's because we just really find it very hard to predict what costs might be for certain things, and insurance policy premiums are that. That is an estimate of a 15% increase over the 2022 to 2023 23 to 24 figure, but we won't get our new premium until May, and so we just have to do a prorated increase and hope for the best. The last couple of years, I think it's been 12% and 18% rises for insurance, which continues to be a major cost problem for us. I've already talked about COLA. That's an assumption, but is also included. Grey Sauble, Owen Sound, North Grey Union Public Library and ITFD, we've added in as assumptions here because whilst we're fairly sure we know what the budgets for these are going to be, I don't believe any of them have formally been passed yet. So these are based on what's been tabled to those respective boards. And then we have potential revenues of $20,000 for a drainage superintendent grant. We've never managed to we haven't managed to claim the provincial drainage superintendent grant before because for many years we haven't had an internal drainage superintendent who's actually spent time working on drainage projects. Very lucky now to have Jessica who's taken on that role, and we put in an application for the grant last year and now have to submit time to show what time Jessica has spent on drainage related work, and then we will get a prorated element of her salary back. We are estimating that at 20,000 because it's based on full cost recovery, not just salary costs, but all of the others as well. It may be a little less than that. It may be a little more than that. We just don't know at this stage, but it's a decent number. The other revenue that we're assuming is funding from TC Energy. You'll see that there is the Ontario Pump Storage budget included, and that budget zeroes out because everything that we've put in there, we are assuming that that organisation will refund us for the costs that we've incurred related to the Ontario Pump Storage project. Most of those expenses are expenses that we'll only incur if we are moving forward and if TCE will have agreed to pay for them. But what we have done this year is put in a cost charge for existing staff salaries, particularly of my time and Rob as Director of Development Services and Tori as Director of Engineering for the time that we will be spending on this project. The estimate for that is $93,690, and that is included as a revenue which offsets that budget increase. So this is a risk because we are not certain that we will receive this money, but we have been told by TC Energy that they have expectations that they will fund capacity funding and the costs that we are currently incurring, and our existing staff time is very much one of those costs. So we made the decision to include that in there as a way of mitigating those budget increases. There are a lot of things inevitably that are not included in this, and the first one is of course the thing that we talk about the most, which is there are no enhancements to service levels or staffing. There is no increase to or decrease to the removal of snowbanks. That is stuff that needs to be added in later if council so wishes. We also haven't included the full insurance deductible cost of the ongoing Tarian legal case. Whilst we know that this is a significant cost to the municipality, over the last 2.5 years, we have been paying bills as and when we've received them, and we have managed to do that through each year's operating budget and haven't needed to dip into the legal reserve. I expect that legal case to carry on for another 2 or 3 years, I would imagine at least. And so my hope is that we can then continue to do that and pull from our operating budget and our surplus if needs be, and dip into the legal reserve when necessary. I don't think it's of benefit to us or the community that we increase our budget significantly to put that money aside when we know that it's likely to be something that is paid over a number of years. The Owen Sound Leaf and Yard Waste contract is also not included. Council approved that for one season in the fall of 2023. We're currently waiting for information from the City of Owen Sound as to what that true cost will be, but it appears that it'll be around double what it was for the end of 2023 if Council wants to go forward. So that's certainly something we can talk about as we go through the budget process. You're all aware, I think, that we have an issue with education-based payment in lieu of taxes for federal properties. Of course, in the majority of cases, that's the base, but it does also include things like Canada Post. The province sets the rate at which we must charge those taxes for education for PILT properties, and then the municipality keeps that money as opposed to it going to the school board. At the moment, the federal government is disputing that provincial rate and is choosing to only pay for a proportion of it. And the federal government and the provincial government are currently in negotiations about what that should be. Because the full amount is still what the tax rate says it is, we are budgeting that we will receive that full amount. So there's no write-off built into that. Again, that is a risk because we haven't had that money in 2021, 22 or 23. But we hope that there will be some settlement of that this year. And if not, we are able to do what we've done in previous years and transfer some surplus money or some other money into the tax stabilization reserve to cover it off. I will say that we were fortunate enough that the provincial government has provided us a grant that covers about 95% of the money that the federal government has not paid to the municipality over the last 3 years. That will mean that we are able to take the money out of the tax stabilization reserve that we've been putting away and in effect use this grant money for another project. Which leads me directly on to the last thing that's not included, which is Bridges 21 and 22. This is something that staff are actively working on, Council's given very clear direction on, but we've made a choice not to include a capital project in this budget because we're still not 100% certain exactly how that project is going to go, when it will be, exactly what type of bridge it is, and what the total cost will be, but also what the funding sources are. We expect there to be a contribution from the Township of Chatsworth, but we don't know what that might be. We know that we have money in reserves to help to cover some of this, and we have nearly 600,000 that we've received from that provincial grant to cover federal PILT deficits. And so my current thinking is that if we need to, that is an unexpected pot of money that we may then be able to use to cover some of the costs of Bridges 21 and 22. Council will get more information about this in the relatively near future, but I just wanted to highlight that it is not included in the budget for those reasons. We also tried to think very carefully about what was included in the budget, particularly on the capital side of things. And every year there are projects that don't make it into the final draft, but this year in particular, I wanted to highlight that these two were there till very late in the process because staff do think they're things that are important, but are also not things that have to be funded or done today. And as you can see, they total around about $300,000, which is about another 1.8% on the tax, on the budget levy. So we made a decision to pull those out at this stage to try and get closer to our hoped for budgets. So the first is the removal of the repaving of the arena parking lot. I think we all know that the alleyway to the east side of the community centre is in pretty rough shape, as is the section at the back. So that will need to be done at some stage, but again, isn't as urgent as some of the things that are in this year's budget. And we also took out $75,000 that we tentatively put in for our future financial software replacement. That software replacement is going to be pretty expensive, and we have been setting aside money over the last couple of years, mostly through surpluses. And we will need additional funds at some stage, but we've taken it out at this point because we're not, again, 100% sure on the timing of it. And we do have some money in the IT reserve, and we may have some sort of surplus this year as well. These reserve transfers are also things that we've done to try and mitigate that overall budget increase. And basically, we've done things to try and get the roads, bridges and facilities capital budgets to be at that funding target of an increase of 1%, 1% and 0.5% rather than more than that. So we currently have about $1 million in the federal gas tax reserve, of which 330,000 is currently allocated to the Leith drainage project and road resurfacing. That leaves around about 650,000 that we believe is currently unallocated, and we think it has come from projects that were allocated through that federal gas tax, but then came in cheaper than we expected, and so there's been just money accruing over a number of years. So our intent is that we use 320 of that 650,000 to reduce the taxpayer cost of Algonquin Road. That fits in the general capital levy because it's mostly around the stormwater issue. And then we've used reserve transfers from the Bridges Reserve and from previous facilities projects that haven't gone ahead, and we can talk later about why, if needs be, to again make sure those roads, bridges and facilities budgets balance. You'll remember that last year we did the opposite. The bridges budget was less than we expected it to be or had estimated it to be in 2023. And so we took 200,000 last year and put that into reserves to make sure that we were hitting that 1% increase. In effect, we're doing the opposite of that this year and taking 90,000 of that 200 back to, again, balance that budget. We've also used some reserves to try and stabilize the operating increase. All of these are things where we believe that the cost increase this year is a one-off or has something that makes it slightly unusual. So there is a suggestion of using $25,000 from the legal reserve to offset the impact of increasing the legal budget from 50,000 to 100,000. Using some money that we held in the ITFD reserve that is in addition to the funds that ITFD have as part of their accounts to reduce the impact of the higher ITFD budget. The ITFD budget is looking like it's going up more than it has in the last number of years because of some changes to capital philosophy and so on. But I'm anticipating that that's a one-time hike, at least to the extent that it is. So our plan is to offset half of that from the reserve and then deal with the second half of the increase next year. Council approved some years ago a wellbeing funding plan that was taking money from the then policing reserve and gently increasing the taxpayer funded portion of that service. Because in the last year or two we haven't used the entirety of the budget, there is more in that reserve than we expected there to be at this point in time. So instead of being 60,000 from reserve and 40,000 from taxpayer in 2024, we're suggesting that we stay at the 2023 levels of 80,000 from reserve and 20,000 from the taxpayer. We're also using the facilities reserve to try and reduce the impact of the building condition assessment project. That's a $70,000 project that is vital for our asset management work, but obviously is a significant one-time cost. So we're suggesting that we limit that and use some reserve funds. Incidentally, on projects like that, and there are a number, whether they be the road scans or the building condition assessments and things like that, our plan going forward, and you'll see it in years 2025 and 2026 of the budget, is to do what we do for elections, which is budget a flat amount every year, transfer that into reserves, and then use it in the year that we need to do the project. So rather than having a $70,000 impact in one year for a building condition assessment, we would have a $15,000 to $20,000 impact every year. And the advantage of that means that then we have some consistent funding. The budget jumps up and down a little bit less, and so it should be easier to plan for the future. We've also included money from the Waste Management Reserve. We've done this in the last couple of years to deal with the fact that the contract for recycling went up more than we had anticipated. This transfer is a little different in that we're offsetting 120,000 that's in the budget as tipping fees for recycling. And the reason that we've done that is that the CMO process for recouping of our costs for blue box recycling is still unclear, to say the least, in parts, and we cannot get a clear answer as to whether these tipping fees will be included in the rebate that we get from CMO. So we've included them in the budget because if we have to pay for them, we have to pay for them. But whilst we have some waste management reserve, we thought it prudent to offset those. Again, by the time we come around to the 2025 budget, I would expect us to know more about that and have got a full year under our belt of that funding. And so then we'll, if we need to increase the budget to cover those fees, then that's what we will have to do. There are a handful of reserve contributions built into this. I've already mentioned the 200,000 for the cost of the aerial truck that was approved last year and 150,000 for a future splash pad replacement with the intent that that project would go ahead in 2025. We have 20,000 in the operating budget for future elections, as we all do. And there's 26,000 in the Meaford Hall budget. This is the capital improvement fee that we charge on every ticket for shows at Meaford Hall. Because it is a capital improvement fee, that should be set aside for future capital projects and not counted as additional revenue. We haven't necessarily been perfect at doing that over the last number of years, but this is something that Val and I and Krista wanted to be sure that we were doing this year. So it is offset by part of the revenues, but it does mean that our sort of usable revenue is less than it previously has been. I won't go through this slide in detail, but this breaks down the changes in each of the different areas of the municipality and particularly in the different types of capital levy that we have at the bottom. And you'll see that those numbers add up in the bottom right-hand corner to that 5.75 tax supported increase. As always, we have our pie charts showing you where those dollars go between the different municipal departments. Inevitably, operations the biggest with our water, our wastewater, sorry, not the water and wastewater, because this is only the tax supported, but with the roads and the parks and recreation in particular, as well as our waste contract, that takes up a significant amount. Community services is as high as it is, as always, because of the policing contract. And then we break that down further between the different teams and the capital levy there in the upper left-hand quadrant. This chart shows the recommended 2024 capital project with some idea of where those funds are going. 35% to transportation services, which includes roads and bridges, 9% to parks, and then a small amount to each one. You'll notice on the black and the red there on the right-hand side that we've split carry forward and ongoing capital projects. In previous budgets, all of these were just listed as carry forward projects to be funded from reserves. But what we wanted to show this year is that in quite a lot of cases, those are projects that have started and are ongoing and may in some cases only have a couple of payments to go or might be done very early in the year, but they are still happening. So the smaller chunk, that 6%, that is carry forward capital projects, and those are the ones that were budgeted for last year but have not been started for whatever reason. And again, we can deal with some of those as we go through the budget days and the capital discussion. Our capital program as a whole totals $11.5 million, and this lays out where that capital funding comes from. Again, this excludes the water and wastewater work. We have just about $5 million from the current year levy, 2.5 from reserve funds, and importantly, that the federal gas tax and the grants and subsidies combined equal about $4 million as well. So, I mean, that's a really, really significant amount of money that we're receiving from various different grant programs. And I think it's really, really positive that we're able to invest a similar amount ourselves to get much more work done than we would have been able to otherwise. In the budget, you will see in various places lines called non-tangible operating projects. Those are the various projects that we do that need money set aside that aren't based around capital things. I won't go through all of these, but we'll be able to answer questions about all of them as we go through the budget days. And there are these they cover pretty much every facet of the organization in terms of asset management, capital planning, IT services, and some of our economic development and council priority needs. So this is where I go back to my budget versus taxes comment and try and turn this into a real number for us all. This year, we are estimating that a 1% change on the total levy is $167,800. So that means that the total levy increase based on all of the things that we've just been talking about, including that anticipated supplementary tax income, the new stuff that will come online in 2024, is a levy increase of 5.75%. The weighted assessment that we base all of our taxes off of has increased by $44 million from 2023 to 2024. That's a 2.27% increase. That means that we project the tax rate, and I will say this is a projected rate. Val is nervous about me saying these words out loud, so it's my fault if it's not quite exactly right. The projected tax increase is 3.47%. That, as we've said, doesn't include any of the enhancements or those kind of things, but it is where we are at with the budget that is in front of you today. It also includes just the 1% for COLA, and I wanted to highlight for you today what that would look like if council decided to change that. Amongst our comparator organisations, and that's mostly municipalities in Grey and Bruce County, the average is between 2.5% and 3% this year. I'm sure Councillor Bartley probably has the exact number written down somewhere. So I've put there 3 different figures to show what the additional budget impact on top of what is already included for 2%, 2.5% and 3%. 2.5% would end up with $158,000 additional, so just under 1%. 3% would be $211,000, so about 1.2%. And then there are a number of enhancements. I know in the past we haven't talked about enhancements at this stage of the process, but have rather come and presented them during the budget days, and we will still do that, and there will be some written reports on these once we get there. But I know there's been some challenge in the past of saying, well, we know what the bottom line number is, and then 3-4 weeks later you get, well, but here's the list of added money. So I wanted to show you that list of added money today. Again, not going to go into these in great detail because we can do that much more thoroughly with the right staff around the table when we have our budget conversations. But these add up to around about $180,000. There is one that I neglected to put in here. There should be I think it's about an $8,000 increase for an additional vehicle for the new facilities team. So with that, we move into the water and wastewater budgets. And whilst these are very significant budgets, in some ways it is easier because we have done what council has previously directed us to do, which is to increase these budgets by 8% annually in accordance with the council adopted financial plan. A significant amount of that, the majority of that, is on capital work. The operating costs have gone up by about the same as the taxpayer one. There are some increased costs to maintain both the water and wastewater systems. Our distribution and collection system need ongoing maintenance, and some of those have increased costs as well. And then there is a significant amount of increased capital funding as well. So you'll see on the water side of things, the total budget increase is $266,000. That's that 8%. The increase on the operating side is about $130,000, and on the capital about 200, about the same, about 130 as well. On the wastewater, Similarly, gone up by 169,000. This is also fairly evenly split between operating and capital, and this one gets us to an 8.04% increase, and that's just because of the way that the numbers, particularly on the capital project, fell. The user rate budget is split between water and wastewater and capital like this. 53% of the project is ongoing capital projects. That, of course, a lot of that is about the wastewater treatment plant and some of the other work that's being done. And then there is $5.6 million worth of funding for capital projects in this area. 2.2 of that coming from development charges. That again, wastewater treatment plant expansion. 1.3 million coming from reserve funds, and then about 2 million coming from the levy itself. So based on this, we do recommend keeping the existing rate increase that the financial plan projected. The water and wastewater rate study that the council approved last year and is in council's priorities is in progress, and we hope to have some more information for you on that soon. But we do not anticipate that that will change the fact that we need increased money to maintain and particularly replace elements of the system. But it may well talk about different ways of charging. So the next steps, these are the dates of the things that we expect to be doing over the next few weeks. Next Friday, the 26th, is the first of our budget days. We will plan to be doing operating that day. You will, as in the past, have the opportunity to talk to all of the managers of the various divisions, as well as the director team. And then we'll do similar with the capital budget on Tuesday, January 30th. If we need it, we can have a third day on the 2nd, but I hope that we will not. Hopefully we've done a good enough job that we can do that between us in the 2 days. Our plan is to have the statutory public meeting on Monday, the February 12th, and then likely do the final approval of the budget on March the 11th. As in previous years, we have an opportunity for both council and the public to ask questions about the budget. People can email those to budgets@meaford.ca. There is also a direct telephone number that's available on our website. We will publish an updated version of the question and answer document on our website every week. And I've just approved the second week's worth of that this morning. And so hopefully we can get as much information out to the public as well. And with that, I have talked enough, so I will let you ask some questions.
Questions, Councillor Bell?
Well, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, to senior staff, thank you very much indeed for trimming internally some projects that on budget presentation, you all could more than make the case for why it's necessary for us to move into doing something and have it applied to the taxes. We have seen other councils in other areas take a look at proposed increases, and they've directed their staff members to go back and trim something internally. You've obviously had some very, probably some very tough conversations internally, and I most definitely appreciate that. This budget does look similar to other budgets in the past. There's natural cost increases and things that happen, and we've got some carryovers of things that have happened in the past. I also want to thank you for trimming some items that I know in past councils we've seen projects put on the table to be done, and then we haven't achieved them. They've been a great percentage of just not being able to achieve. And again, you've looked at doing that. The one area though that I do hope that staff can come back with a little bit more of an affirmative answer on is the line from TC Energy at over 93,000. That when we get into those days, to me, that's an important number for us to get a little better handle on. And if we can come up with that one way or another, where we actually sit with that organization. So I appreciate the number today. I do think it will make it, I think it'll make it tough on us in the next, those full days. And, anyway, I do appreciate the work you've done internally. And, I think I can just say the 5.75 is a good starting place. Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Keaveney.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I certainly support your comments, Councillor Bell. Thank you for those in terms of the incredible work staff have done to date on this budget. And I also want to express to Mr. Smith, I appreciate your explanation on the difference between the tax levy and the tax rate numbers. That's really helpful as well and has never been explained to this council in the way that you have today. So thank you for that. I do want to follow up on Councillor Bell's comment, though, in relation to the cost center for TC Energy, and you've explained how you arrived at the number that's in the budget line today. But my thinking is that's not enough, that we need to be looking at a retroactive number. We've received no financial support from TC Energy for any staff time to date, no capacity funding whatsoever. So I strongly believe that we need to have another look at that. And I'm going to look to you, Mr. Smith, as to how you'd like to approach that. Would you like a notice of motion, or would you like to just suggest that staff will do a report on that and come back to council with an increased number, and also with an understanding of how you will approach TC Energy with this? And has there been conversation to date with them on the number that has been presented to us, or how will that communication go forward?
Thanks for the questions, both on that subject. I don't think we'll have, to answer Councillor Bell's point, we certainly won't have a sort of a firm guarantee on that number before we have budget conversations basically next week. I certainly can have more information for council about exactly how I came up with that number and its percentages of various salaries, but we have that listed, so I can explain that. I think with regard to whether it's the right number or not, I think it depends on what it is that council wants to do as to how we approach it. That number this year should be for this year. So if council feels that the $93,000 doesn't cover the cost that we will incur from staff time in 2024, then we can increase that number. If we want to look retroactively, I think that's separate, and we should treat that as one-time funding. Because obviously if we include let's say, for the sake of saying, that there was 2022 and 2023 payments for around about the same amount, if we were to have $186,000 appear and put it into our budget now as a revenue, that would put us in a much worse position next year, because that would then become part of the base budget. So if we're looking at retroactive payments, I think we look at that as one-time funding, and we look at then on how we would like to use that to move a project forward or do something specific with it. For the 2024 amount, I think that's something that council can change during the budget deliberations, and we will be doing the normal motions during the budget days to make amendments to the budget. And so if you want to bring that forward at that stage, that will be fine. In terms of retroactive costs, the internal working group, which includes the mayor and deputy mayor, are currently working on a fulsome work plan that we will then want to bring forward to both council and TCE. And I think that's probably the time that we would then include some information about the costs for previous work, because that's when we'd be talking about the costs for future work as well.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. I might as well say something. I've watched all the other municipalities' budget processes, and they range from 10% to 30%. And each one of them over the last 4 years have cut things that has hurt them the next year. And none of them have put money aside for future infrastructure. And that's the difference between Meaford and the other 8 municipalities, is the 2.5 that we've done puts us 15 points ahead of them right off the bat, that we've already got in there. I'm just curious, Mr. Smith, I want to thank you and staff for bringing a very lean budget forward. I know you were looking at higher figures, and I hope that any of the stuff you cut isn't going to hurt us next year. I'm quite certain that didn't happen. And I've got
about 8 pages on budget. We'll bring that up next week or the week after. I have to bring this up now. I watched the town of Blue Mountains this week, and in hour 20 of their budget deliberations, they were still at 9%. And they magically said, well, we'll have a surplus of 1.2 to 1.6 million this year. We don't know what it is yet. And they instantly applied 1.2 million of the surplus towards their budget. And now they're down at 2.5% increase. Is that not dangerous?
Exceptionally so.
I have asked their CAO the question. He hasn't answered me yet. That was like shooting yourself in the foot.
I did not see that conversation, and I don't want to talk specifically about the town of Blue Mountains, but we have never recommended that we use one-time funding, and a surplus is in effect one-time funding to offset a tax rate increase. Because as soon as you do that, you're not reducing the amount that we have to raise to cover our costs. And so that just means that amount of money basically gets added to next year's budget increase. And then presumably there will be a budget increase next year as well, because costs keep going up. So I think by saving yourself in 2024, you would be doubling your issue in 2025.
Correct. And that's the way I see it. I'm hoping for an answer back. I'm hoping we can use some, if we have a surplus on something, on a one-time funding issue to help us through. But it just, boom, it happened in about 60 seconds in a budget, and they dropped 6% like that. And I was flabbergasted. I thought,
I think that it is possible to use one-time funds like that for capital projects in particular, because, okay, once a capital project is in and done, it's done. The danger if you do that, specifically on the capital side, is that then, you basically send us backwards on our 1%, 1% and 0.5%. But if there was something to say, the general tax levy, the general capital bucket of our capital this year is around about 300,000 higher than it has been previously. And that bucket hasn't increased in many years. It happens to be that there is a project in that bucket that is about $300,000 to the taxpayer. So if we were to use one-time funding to offset that, then it wouldn't put us backwards, because we'd still be at the baseline of where that bucket of capital funding was. We have done that in a couple of places from reserves and things rather than surplus, but we've done it to get us to the baseline, not to get us below the baseline.
correct. And I appreciate that. And I may use that card another day. This is the wrong time to bring this up, but not really. We're going into the budget raising money for bridge number 2. And it's over $1 million. Has that tender went out? And where I'm going with this is maybe, just maybe, because that bridge is for 2 people to use, we could use another type of a bridge that has come to light, which would not be 1.4 million.
Through your worship, we can definitely talk more about it. We're still in design for that bridge, but they are looking at a built-in box option. A lot of the money has to do with providing access during construction. So the price of the bridge isn't actually that significant in comparison. So we are looking at our options, but I think what we have is a really good option and similar to what we are looking at for structures 21 and 22.
Thank you. I didn't want to vote to tender without more information on that. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, your worship. Just on the subject of surplus or deficit. By Friday, January 6th, I wonder if Miss Manning could give us an idea if we will know what our 2023 year end was, or very close to knowing.
I will try to give you an estimated number. I can't give you a final number.
My closing remarks at 5.75 would be a good starting point. But I hope that all media sources print 3.47. That would be nice to see written down. So, thank you.
Yes, if we're done, I'll just say that I'm a lot happier this year than I was last year. It's a much better starting point, and I want to thank staff for getting us to it. We're still on page 2 of the 7-page agenda, but you've been sitting for an hour and a half. Do you want to take a 10-minute break? It's okay. We're adjourned temporarily. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're now moving into motions and bylaws for decision, our consent agenda. Is there anything, these three items that you wish to deal with separately, or can we pass them all in one fell swoop? What's your pleasure here? Everyone's good with passing these in one motion? Oh, sorry, Councillor Urick?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to actually just have a question or two on A.
On A?
Yeah.
Okay, so shall we deal with then B and C, a motion to approve them, Councillor Greenfield, seconded by Councillor Forder. Any discussion? All in favor? That is B and C are carried, and coming back to item A, go ahead.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. No, I just had I just wanted to know, good report and thank you. And I'm actually pleased the way this is going. My question is, I didn't see anything in there about creating some kind of a demerit system or about talking about an actual fee structure. So I'm just wondering, when are we going to see something to those regards? Because those are going to have a huge bearing even through the report, just what some of the concerns some of the people have. And just some of the control mechanisms we'll have through our demerit system. So I'm just wondering when we might see that.
Through your worship, so when under item 5, that when it's talking about the recommendation, it refers to infraction reporting mechanisms. That's what we're considering, that the demerit point system might be in there. And in terms of the cost on that, that's part of the next step for us to understand, okay, well, what does it take to do all these things? So when it comes back to council, I would fully expect that that's when the potential price tag comes into play.
Any other questions? You ready to vote? All in favor? And that is carried. And I guess that of course dealt with our short-term accommodation bylaw, and the two items that we did approve there. One was 2024 operations of Blue Dolphin Pool, which is now being managed by the Y, and the third one was the Syke Street crosswalk update, where we approved the level 2 type B conversion kit, which I think we all agreed should suffice to improve safety at that intersection. So now we move on to items for consideration, and the first is bylaw 2024, the deputy fire chief appointment. The deputy mayor is leaving because she declared a conflict of interest in this item. The recommendation is, be it resolved that bylaw 2024-01, being a bylaw to appoint a deputy fire chief, be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Motion to move that. Councillor Greenfield, seconded by Councillor Urick. Discussion? All in favor? And that is carried. If someone would like to alert the deputy, yes, come on. It didn't take long. Item B is the property exchange at 371 Aiken Street. So the motion is that Council of the Municipality of Meaford declare Part 2 of the closed Ryerson Street road allowance to be surplus land. 2, authorize the transfer of Part 2 of the closed Ryerson Street road allowance to the Blue Water District School Board. 3, authorize the receipt of Part 1, 87 Aiken Street from the Blue Water District School Board. 4, authorize the mayor and clerk to execute all necessary documentation for said land transactions. And 5, direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to confirm said land transactions. Need a motion for that? Councillor Bell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Keaveney. Discussion? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think the first thing that I do want to mention on this to the folks that really were hoping that the municipality could acquire the entire tract property. It was in the report that the dollar value that they were seeking was just out of our range. And even when we requested Grey County have a look, it was out of their range. So I am happy to have the fact that we're going to do a property exchange and that we have an area down there of a sufficient size. Just going off my memory, I didn't jot a note, but it's somewhere around a couple of acres down there. So, or maybe it's slightly more, but anyway, we've got a nice chunk on the corner. And in the report, I read that there's even some conversation with the community garden people. They've been seeking a spot, knowing that where they've been at is going to disappear. So I'm happy that we've worked out this and we have had it surveyed and there's an understanding. So I'm happy to be the one that moves this, and I hope that my fellow councillors are also happy with this.
Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Your Worship. And again, I would agree with Councillor Bell. This is kind of the best that we can hope for with this property in terms of acquiring a nice chunk that we can use appropriately. I was just going to share that at Grey County, when the discussions failed with the school board, there was a letter sent to the Ministry of Education. And as recently as last week, I followed up on this and we've received no response in that regard at this point. And so I'm just a little bit disillusioned with the whole process that, this was an ideal location for affordable housing. And we know that that was the desire of the school board, was to see their surplus properties used for housing. And we haven't been able to pull that together. So I think all of that is unfortunate. But anyway, we will still hope for a response from the ministry to the county's letter.
If I can, I wouldn't mind if we could put the map up. I had trouble interpreting the map. I would like to see exactly what we've got, if that's possible.
Derek's going to give it a go while we're talking.
I think that, I don't know why, but I did not see clear definition of the property that we would be acquiring as a result of the transaction, and I think that's important. Did you wish to speak at this point? Okay. Sure. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner. I've got a little issue with this, not with the end result. I think we're putting the cart before the horse because it is still out there that the county may want to purchase the other portion of this. And if we give the Board of Education this tight little parcel, that really changes the negotiations of the county to take over the other 2/3 of this. I think we're putting the cart before the horse until we get an answer from the Board of Education or the Minister of Education.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have an answer from the school board in that they rejected Grey County's offer. I think the school board is now and may already have put this piece of land up for sale at a market price. I do not believe there will be any change on this. As the Deputy Mayor says, we've heard nothing back from the ministry until, and this has now been 3 or 4 months. I think this still makes sense to do even regardless of that, because certainly in all of our conversations with the county, we have talked to them about this proposed land swap, and it's been something we've been working on since before that county option came up. If the county were successful in buying the rest of that land, which I think is a very, very big long shot now, then having done this, they would have an unencumbered piece of land, and then we would still be able to maintain green space there. And then potentially that will mean that the counties could densify a little more than they will be able to otherwise, because we would have some parkland in that vicinity.
Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship. Back last April, when this first came forward, I thought this was a reasonable idea. At that time, we were hopeful that the municipality, the County of Grey, and the school board could come to some kind of a conclusion that would lead to some income-based housing on this property. And I was hoping for still a good size retention of green space too. Now I'm not nearly as keen on this deal as I was. Yes, maybe there is still opportunity for for lower priced housing. If that doesn't come to pass, then the school board ends up with a pretty nice piece of turf. And I don't think we have any guarantee that in the future it may end up that the school board just puts it on the open market for developer A, B, or C. I wouldn't like to see a developer come along similar to the one who's come along to the property below our library and propose a monster building that takes up over 90% of the entire property. I can still see this as being a bit of a win-win. But when I look at it, I on the barometer of win-win, I see municipality here and the school board up here. I don't know. I don't like it nearly as much as what I did 9 months ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, let me try and show where we are with all of this, and then I do have a comment to Councillor Greenfield's comment. Where you see going sort of from the mid left of the page down at an angle and then along horizontally, the strip that's marked as part 3 and then part 2. So actually, maybe I have a different idea. So where you see this is the road allowance that the municipality currently owns, part 3 and part 2. Now that road allowance was known as Ryerson Street. It was stopped up in 1961 and really has never formed part of a plan to put a street through there. All of these individual lots that you can see were part of the original plan. And so you can tell that because you have Aiken Street here and Ryerson Street here and 2 lots in between, so one facing onto each road. The idea would be that we would keep this part 3, the municipal road allowance that already exists, and the St. Vincent Pump House is in this area here already. Part 2, this long stretch of road allowance will be transferred to the school board. And then this section outlined in a darker line, which says part 1 in the middle, but is sort of hidden by some of the lot lines. This is the equivalent amount as that piece of road allowance, and this will be what will be transferred to the municipality. So in effect, we would end up with a piece of property that went from, 100 yards, I think that is, 100 feet perhaps, that must be 100 yards, coming down basically to the edge of the property to where the Georgian Trail is, and then all the way over to St. Vincent and Aiken Street. I think that, I'm going to sit down before I answer the other question. I think in terms of whether this is a good deal or not, and I noticed that Rob wants to make a comment as well, I still think that this is actually a great deal for the municipality on a couple of different levels. For the municipality as a corporation, we get some land that we can use as parkland without having to pay for it, in exchange for some land that we have absolutely no use for whatsoever. And in fact, in essence, hasn't really been part of our inventory, because for as many years as the track has been there, it's just been treated as part of the one property. So we gain around about 1.8 acres worth of land that we can do something with. And then the school board gains one single parcel, and then they can sell as one single parcel. The advantage to the community, I think, which is the other thing, is that it can then be sold as one single parcel. Because if a developer was looking at this property and technically it was 2 different properties and a road allowance owned by the municipality, if I was a developer, I would go with that, oh, that's complicated. I'm going to have to pay this amount of money for the land that I want to buy. Then the municipality is going to make me pay for that, or going to make life difficult for me and may not even sell it to me in the first place. And so it will become very difficult to develop that piece of land to the level that we want. if there is any hope that the housing to go on there is somewhat attainable or affordable, then it has to be pretty dense. You know, we could technically still run that Brierson Street Road down there, but then you're only creating, what's that, 25 lots altogether. Whereas if we had one single property for the majority of it on the east side, then we could potentially have apartment blocks or townhomes or stacked townhomes and things like that that would make more use of that and provide more housing. The only way we're going to have cheaper housing in the community is by having more density. We have a series of planning rules in place already that would mean that they wouldn't be able to use a 90% block coverage on something like this. The other element is that this property is currently zoned as open space. So it will have to be rezoned to some sort of residential stuff. So anybody who buys it will have to do a zoning application, and then we will have some control then on how that looks going forward. There are different things we could do with that if it's a development that we are particularly keen on because the county has managed to buy it or a low-cost housing provider has bought it. We could potentially do that rezoning as part of our rewrite of the zoning bylaw. If it's being done as a commercial property, then we would have them make their application in the way that any other developer would have to, and then we would be able to work with them to make sure it was something that was acceptable. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Rob.
Please.
Thank you, through your worship. Matt, you're doing a great job at playing planner, urban designer, another hat. You've covered a lot of things, but I think it's important to note from an urban design and community livability perspective, having a park of that size in that location, it acts as a really great sort of gateway into that neighborhood. It is, again, assuming the rest of it would be developed. It's a great connection to the trail. There is no guarantee that we would get that same piece of land. In fact, if you look at the requirements for park space, it would be a 5%. It's not this amount. So if we go through the regular process and we're playing around, any additional lands that a developer would have to put in would just be at 5%, and then we would just be in with a negotiation of, are you purchasing our land? Are you doing a trade? What have you? When it comes to the end of looking at it from a development perspective, or a corporation that's going to come and build something there, yes, our market is pretty hot for what we're used to. A site like this, where a municipality is saying things like, well, this will give us a chance to leverage more out of someone, and that will increase, I would assume, increase the risk high enough that people will walk away. This makes the site almost undevelopable because I don't think people would look at it as saying they're going to get their money out of it. They're going to have to negotiate with the municipality on a right of way where you're openly saying, we want to use this to leverage something, and they still have to go through the public process of a rezoning. We have enough policies in the official plan that address rezoning, open space, and that in terms of requiring a master plan and these kinds of things. Matt was right. Density is our tool for driving better and smaller scale housing, which means it is a lesser price. Does that mean it's, quote, affordable? No. We know that without subsidies, affordable housing cannot be built in the for-profit market because the costs of construction are higher than what the affordability threshold is. But you can have a greater variety of housing and higher density apartment form housing, and even if it is a 3-story, 4-story kind of thing, is inherently cheaper than single family homes for all the reasons that I'm sure we're aware of. So I would say that and if we move down the path of saying, well, no, because then we want to leverage this, and great, the community has this de facto park. Well, I think it's quite clear the school board isn't going to maintain this. The track is not coming back because we choose not to do this. They're not going to suddenly build the track again. Like this, I would argue from a planning perspective, would not be a win. We would just have a different kind of vacant derelict site that then we have to figure out how are we going to run and manage that, and what kind of relationship does that mean, and what kind of cost center have we created for maintenance, maybe in partnership with the school board or what have you. But this doesn't suddenly turn it into a nice park because we made it impossible to build on.
I think you want to respond to that immediately. Maybe, Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Mr. Floyd. Thanks, Mr. Smith. I do appreciate your opinions and you make some valid comments. I guess I'm tired of our municipality basically giving away our unopened road allowances and unopened streets. A former council member objected to that a few years ago, and I have to agree with them. To me, this Toronto Metropolitan University Street is vital for a potential purchaser. To me, that piece of property is to somebody worth an awful lot of money for future development. I just to me I mean, we can, if we could sell it to the developer. We've already got a lot of municipal parks. We've already got a lot of plans for a lot of municipal parks. What we don't have is a lot of funding to enhance and improve those parks. To me, if we could get 150,000, that's just a ballpark figure, 50,000 for that strip of street, yes, we'd lose what I call the nose of this property over at St. Vincent Street. But what we could gain from the sale of Ryerson Street, put it into reserve for future development of the parks we have. It's just a suggestion. It's up to council to make the determination.
Councillor Uri,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Vanna. My question is, when you were up there, I was trying to glean exactly, is that kind of where the track starts now? Is that kind of by the basketball courts? It was hard to really determine because there aren't lots there now, where exactly that falls, that partition, how exactly much of that field we're getting. I'm presuming it is around between the basketball court and the track area, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I don't know. That would be probably my guess as well, but I certainly haven't gone and pasted it out, so I'm not sure.
So my complaint, and I appreciate Mr. Greenfield's comments. My complaint is more with the education minister than it is anybody to do with us or the board, because nobody is putting the feet to the fire from a provincial reg to say, hey, play fair with that land and do it to create affordable housing or something, because they've already made money on that tax base basically over the years already. So it seems that that's where that's where my disappointment is, and that's where the blame has to go. This is the only benefit we'll get out of it. It seems, and that's too bad. My question is, are we taking into consideration the maintenance or any kind of municipal plan about what we're going to do with that property once this comes to fruition?
So we deliberately haven't gone too much into detail on what the plan could be until we got to this stage. I think I've said in the report, council gave some direction in a closed session some time ago to move forward with this, and so we've gone and got the survey, and now we're at this stage. So no, there is no significant plan. Having said that, we have been looking for some period of time now to find a long-term home for the community garden. They currently have, I think, about 1/4 acre on the old school site, and would be delighted to have 1/2 to 2/3 of an acre, I'm sure, or perhaps more. There is a real advantage there with it being beside the pump station, is that we have water in the vicinity and so on. by the time you've done that and dealt with some sort of parking area so that you wouldn't have to necessarily have everybody on the streets, you don't have a huge amount of space. So I think it would probably be literally some green space and maybe not a lot more, at least in the short run. I certainly don't see this as being a master planned park that's $1 million or anything like that. But Councillor Greenfield is absolutely right. There is a cost to this, and we do have lots of plans for parks and so on. So I think it's just the trade-off of what do we want to do more. I right now, this sounds silly considering how many parks we do have, but I do not have a place for the community gardens to go in the long run, bearing in mind some of the other decisions that we've got to make over the next couple of years. So this seems like an easy option, but we also do not have to do anything for that group if council didn't want to. So I think, this can go whichever way we want, and I think can be done with relatively little cost, or if we really wanted to, a lot of cost.
I'd like to hear from you, Tori.
Through your worship, just about the location, I pulled it up on our GIS. It looks like it's right at the edge of the west side of the track.
Okay. So then my follow-up would be then, so keeping the basketball courts, which are already there and perfectly viable, was something we could do. But my question is more about, we talked about with the expansion of the wastewater plant, with where is the dog park going to go? Is that still in concert for here, or is the space not big enough to accommodate that?
The dog park's another really interesting one in that it can be as big or as small as we'd like it to be to a certain extent. I think we're very lucky with how much space it has right now, but it probably doesn't need to be as big. And my guess is that the next location might not be able to deal with that. So it is an option, yes. I think we're looking at a few different places, and this is definitely one of them. Again, having not done the math on how much space we need for all of those things, and obviously if a dog park, we probably need a bit more parking than we would do otherwise, and so on. So we would have to figure that out.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner. And just adding to where the line goes, as far as I see it, takes in about a sixth of the track. If you follow them lines on, because Grey County GIS has the lot lines and everything on it. Anyway, so it's at the edge of the track or into the track. Having said that, I like the plan of using it for community gardens. In the back of my mind, I've been looking for a spot for 2 years. I like that plan. The only stickler of me is doing this gives the Blue Water Board of Education is flying in the face of what the Minister of Education stated. And I've got some calls out and got some emails out about that. And I just don't understand how they can do that.
So what I will say is that the Blue Water School Board is doing exactly what they are legislatively obliged to do. What the education minister said in a press conference at some stage is not the rule that the Blue Water Board has to do. So I think it's really important that we don't say that this is something that's being done inappropriately. I think there is a massive inconsistency between what's being said politically and what's being done. But in the same way as we are obliged to get appraised value for any land that we sell, the school board is as well.
What you're saying is politicians really don't mean anything.
No comments.
The Minister of Housing, has also pronounced on this kind of situation, and we didn't get the courtesy of a reply from either ministry on this, as far as I'm aware. I kind of dislike the way you're using the word leverage, if I may say, for the simple reason that I'd like somebody who is fundamentally a strategist to say, you could leverage this road allowance this way if you were the board, or you could leverage it this way if you were the municipality. I think that we should give ourselves a chance to at least make sure we are doing the best we can by the municipality, because as councillors, we all promise to do that. And we are, very, unhappy with the fact that everything has conspired against us, including, all the people who talk the good talk about affordable housing. I'd like to have somebody who knows a lot more than I do about it advise us as to what our options really are before we before we vote on it, is sort of where I'm coming from. Go ahead, Mr. Voigt.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'll just clarify, when I was referring to the kind of leveraging this moving forward, yes, there's all the opportunity in the world if someone's looking to purchase this, to have that kind of discussion on that give and take, right? And there's values associated with that. My point was that depending on how that's framed, particularly in this forum right now and moving forward, is that you run the risk of the message that are sent that you're creating too much of a hurdle to even get the people to the table. They will measure the risk of this of, I'm not just buying a piece of land and I know I need to deal with the municipality for all the things you always do and a public process and a rezoning. But if the message is, we're going to really, really squeeze you for a whole bunch of things that may not even be possible. If we set the bar at attainable housing or affordable housing, you may not get the person coming to the table to say, I want to negotiate with you. So all I'm saying is that with leverage, we're entering a game then of negotiation with folks that we don't even know who they may or may not be. And so that's tough. So we shouldn't be saying, well, it's too bad and we shouldn't be giving the school board this great piece of land to move forward with. I would just argue, well, why not? That's not a good reason. Perhaps maybe there needs to be something where we are going to the table with them and others that are coming forward. That might be a less something that ranks a little less high on the risk register for someone who wants to invest millions of dollars in a site. That's kind of what I was getting at with that. And I believe having outside support for that moving forward, I would be, not that I get to vote, but I think I'd be in favor of that too, because we would be entering a very different role as a municipality in that.
I think the other thing, just to make sure we're all on the same page, is that if council chooses not to do this today, the school board will go ahead and sell the site as it currently is, and we'll still own the road allowance going through the middle. But us saying no today doesn't stop this process for us to figure out a next step. But in some ways, might hasten.
I guess what I'm saying is maybe we would rather be negotiating with the purchaser than the school board.
We may, but that could backfire as well, because as Rob says, 5% in terms of parkland in lieu and so on, or it lies fallow for a long time. There's as with everything, there's a risk with both ways.
We've also found that we can't choose our developers and we can't tell them what to do either. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Your Worship. And all I can suggest is that, and you'll remember, Director Boyd, it's a few years ago now when we spoke with an interested party, just looking at the property, who didn't seem the least bit concerned about there being a municipal road allowance running through it. And the term that we used that day was influence. And so I'm listening to the discussion and thinking, what gives us the most influence in terms of, to Councillor Greenfield's point, maintaining as much green space as we can while permitting some worker-based housing on this property. So it's something that I know it's before us for decision today, but it requires considerable thought and consideration as to what is our best approach here to achieve that result.
Councillor Forder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Very good discussion. I appreciate everybody's input on this. So when this came to our table, obviously everybody had different opinions on what would be the best outcome for this land. So even though the outcome may not be the ideal outcome that we all envisioned at the very beginning, particularly in Mr. Voigt's comments, I believe that this decision is in the best interest of urban planning. I do see this as a win as well. We can't push the school board around. They're not gonna budge. So I feel that this is a great opportunity for us to have a permanent home for the community gardens and also having some level of green space. So under the circumstances, I think this is a good decision as advised by senior staff.
Thank you for that. Are you ready to vote? See nobody wanting to carry the conversation further, so all in favor? That's very good. Next, item C, Heritage Permit, 141 Sykes Street North. The recommendation from staff is that the Council of the Municipality of Meaford approve Part 3 of the Heritage Permit for 141 Sykes Street North as presented in the as-built drawings, with the condition that the brickwork be replaced where it was removed on the rear facade in a manner that matches in composition, design, texture, color, and craftwork to the original as appropriate and practicable. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this? Moved by Deputy Mayor Keaveney, seconded by Councillor Uhrig. It looks like Meredith, that you're prepared to present on this. If you would, thank you.
There you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So I just wanted to give a little context on this file, especially considering some of the members around the horseshoe today are not part of the committee itself, the Heritage Advisory Committee. And so the file, it has been considered by the Heritage Advisory Committee 4 times in total, twice in 2021 and twice in 2023. And the reason for that is that the committee requested to defer elements of the permit, which were applied for in 2021, until such time as further details were provided by the applicant. So as time has gone on, the applicant has provided revised drawings, and there's been further approvals basically as a result of that. So part 1 of the permit was approved in 2021, and there were 2 conditions related to the replacement of the roof and the turret on the property. And that allowed that roof work to take place. And so, and then as that also allowed for the applicant to have more time to give more details about changes to the dwelling to the committee. Part 2 was also approved in 2021 with several conditions, and they're all outlined in the report. The one I'd bring to mind today, because it's quite important for today, is the condition that several pieces of work were to be deferred until a future date. And those details were the cladding of the garage in the 2nd story, the railing at the rear side of the house, and the details for that, and the color palette of the windows and trim. So that's the information that still needed to be provided back to the committee. So it was outstanding in 2021. Some of the renovations were then completed, and the applicant submitted revised information to support the remaining works. And then in 2023, a recommendation to council was deferred by the committee at their meeting, at the September 13th, 2023 meeting, because the committee again requested the applicant provide further details of proposed changes to the property and to then return to a future meeting. So finally, the 4th time this file was considered was in November of 2023. And that's when the applicant returned to the committee for further consideration. And at that time is when the committee made a motion to recommend that council refuse the approval of part 3 of the permit. So we're following along so far. During that discussion at the November 29th meeting, the committee raised a few concerns about some of the works that don't conform with the Heritage Conservation District Plan / were not part of the original proposal. So those concerns that were identified by the committee are, firstly, changes to the window shape and the design, which differ from the original design, and the as-built drawings. Those are the drawings that were reviewed by the committee, showing what has already been built on the lands. Secondly, the replacement of the brick at the rear of the building with board and batten instead. And then finally, the cantilever addition on the 3rd story of the building. So that's a bit of context on the file to date. Now, obviously, the file is in front of council. You have 3 options today. One is to accept the Heritage Committee recommendation and refuse the permit. Second is to approve the permit. And finally is to approve the permit with conditions. And I'll leave it there, and I'm open to questions.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Meredith, for bringing those of us up to date who are not members of the Heritage Advisory Committee. I think my question for you, following the recommendation from staff to proceed with the condition of Mr. Utterbridge replacing the brick, and we heard him speak earlier today, but what is the process? What guarantees do we have? What enforcement opportunities are there to make sure that if we agree to that today, that the gentleman follows through and does replace the brick?
Oh, go ahead.
Through your worship, I'll take care of that, given my oversight of bylaw enforcement. So if council were to pass that condition as part of the permit, I guess from the proposition that the deputy mayor is making, then at some point in time, this applicant does not do those works, then we would have to define when that threshold is that we engage bylaw enforcement to enforce the provisions of the Heritage Act. That would incur some costs in terms of us getting legal advice on how to even go forward with that. It's not a common thing that happens. Definitely not something we've done here. So there'd be a bit of a cost to that. And then if we would take it to its sort of extreme logical conclusion of having to take full legal action in this, we would have the costs associated with that. And I can only assume, given what we have with other similar types of enforcements out there, like land use planning type things, it is exceedingly rare that the municipality can ask for and receive costs for that. So then it would just be that legal matter that would be before us. But we do not have any other mechanisms. There's nothing in the building code that we can use in terms of permits or things like that. Holding those back, it would be a bylaw enforcement issue.
Councillor Yuri? Oh, sorry. Well, I guess Councillor Forty, you were first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, appreciate that, Director Voigt. Thank you. I have a little bit of a problem with this because what's the point in having agreements when we don't have the ability to enforce them? I feel like we might be setting a precedent where somebody could buy a home in the Heritage District, do some renovations that differed from the original proposal. And this is more like a beg for forgiveness than ask for permission scenario. And that's not right. I feel like if this is, I believe there's only 2 turrets in the municipality. So structurally, this building is fairly significant. And if I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just want to say I'm frustrated because I feel that if we have 1s and 2s of these that happen, we slowly lose the architectural heritage in this municipality. And that's something that's very important. So where are the teeth in this? How can we make sure that somebody has a heritage permit and they do work that is not previously approved or differed from the original proposal, yet they still go ahead and do that at their cost? It's their mistake. And we say, well, they've already incurred cost, so let's accept that they've done something wrong and continue to move forward. It's a really jagged pill for me to swallow. And I feel that we really need to be supporting our advisory committees. And we're in the process of restructuring our advisory committees. So with the Heritage Advisory Committee, they put all the work into doing all of this. They provide the right advice to council and to staff. And we have a heritage plan in place. We have an agreement, and that agreement is not followed through. And we're just supposed to accept that and move on. Like, I have a really hard time accepting that. And of course, the level of enforcement, just like a bylaw, what good is a bylaw if we don't have the ability to enforce? So this is an opportunity for us as a council to take a stand and let people know that heritage is important to this municipality. And we will hold people accountable when they do not follow the terms and conditions that are in the agreement. So I just want to throw that out there and test the waters with the rest of council and see how they feel. But I'm not happy with how this is done. And so before I get too emotional about it, I'm just going to leave it there. But This is my show of support to our Heritage Advisory Committee, and I know how hard they work, and I respect and appreciate, and I have so much gratitude for how much work our Heritage Advisory Committee puts into these matters, because it is a tremendous amount of work. And anybody that doesn't know, go speak to somebody at the Heritage Advisory Committee and spend some time with them, and you'll really understand how much work this actually is. And these are unpaid volunteer positions. So just something to think about, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. As Chair of the Heritage Committee, I appreciate your comments and agree with them, actually. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, fellow councillor, you've hit on a couple of key words that I have spoke on in the past. One is having teeth in the ability to enforce. That is important. I have seen requests from homeowners inside the Heritage District. And the one that I am thinking of, a person said, I would like to put an addition at the back of my home because I would like to have a nice look out over the bay. And that was approved because the front of the street had the streetscape, and they put an addition that from the streetscape you couldn't see, and they were allowed to proceed. I'm picking on the word at the rear of their building. The other thing, many years ago, when the Heritage District was first implemented, I got a copy of what you can and cannot do, and I'm sure that it has been modified, but one of the things they talked about was brick. And in the example that was in that publication, a building that may require a fire escape being attached to the outside of a building may have to remove brick, but the requirement on that was that the bricks that are removed were put on skids, or at least they were to be retained and not lost, so that in the future, should something change again, they have the original bricks that can go back into the original building, and that was a requirement. So my comments on this, are we talking about the rear of a building, or from the Heritage District's look, are we still then looking at streetscape because you can go down the side street and look at it? Or could we ask the owner of the building to retain the bricks forever and not lose them? And again, how do we enforce the fact that the bricks just don't disappear? But that's the two things that I'm thinking about. Is this a rear of the building? And can we simply say to them, retain the bricks that have been removed?
Go ahead, Mr. Voigt. Thank you.
Through your worship, first question. It is not on what you might consider the primary frontage. If we say Sykes Street, if we can, that's a, that's a high street. It's a corner site, so it has it fronts onto a secondary street. So it's somewhere in between the situation you were describing. Our heritage plan, such as it is, does identify that a number of different character areas in the district, and does identify brick as being one of the main facade treatments that create that character, right? If I recall correctly, and if I'm wrong, Meredith will correct me, I'm sure, as probably with the mayor. I think in this circumstance, the owner does not have the bricks anymore. At least that is what he said during the last meeting. And this is one of the challenges, particularly with a file that has, probably in hindsight should have just been dealt with one approval or not, as opposed to this part thing over and over again. It was caused some problems, but my understanding is that the bricks do not exist. The language you see in there in the recommendation about being of the similar quality and character, and that's directly out of our plan. Those are the words on how it's described, right? So it's not about mimicking the heritage, but it's of the same quality and in fitting if you're replacing them in the case where they have been lost.
Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks, Brendan. That impassioned speech was appropriate, and I think I agree. I don't agree totally with the do and ask forgiveness later scenario. My question is, in his correspondence to us, as he had indicated earlier, online, was circumstances, both logistical and financial, make this an impossibility for me. So anybody can say that. I have no idea what his finances are like. My question is, the building as it is now, if we enforce something that he cannot do and he walks away from, where are we at? What happens then? And again, it goes back to enforcement, but if he is literally says, I'm declaring bankruptcy or walking away, what's the status of the building? Is there any issue with concern, or is this kind of all bluster from both sides?
Through your worship, I can't speak to his position. I will say then we're back to, as the deputy mayor's question was, on how we deal with enforcement. I don't know what the limitations are in terms of municipality doing the works under the Heritage Act. So we can do works, for example, for building safety, right? There's another building in our downtown in the Heritage District that the municipality has had to go in and do some repairs on the roof a number of times, and that we could do that because it was dealing with the structural integrity of the building. That would not be the case here, so I don't know how much we can do. I'll note that in terms of teeth, yeah, I mean, the act has teeth. I just pulled it up here. Quotes, individuals found guilty of contravening the Heritage Act. They're subject to, again, that doesn't mean for sure, fines up to $50,000 or imprisonment for up to 1 year. I think you'd be hard pressed to find where that has been the case, but when written, that was the level of importance that the province gave to the Heritage Act. So that is what is gives us the teeth, but it would be done through bylaw enforcement and then going to court.
I have a question, and it's simply, what is the real impact if we do not approve the heritage permit? My impression is just that we telegraph a big message to the community that really you can do whatever the hell you want. I mean, if that's the outcome, then I want to know if that is or is there something else here that I'm missing?
Through your worship, I don't know if that's the message you're sending. This is, by piecemealing this application, it has created a real conundrum. That is the gist of it. I will say, again, and this is, heritage is, when the way we're talking about it, when we're dealing with district versus buildings, we're familiar with Meaford Hall, we're familiar with the fire hall. Those have their own designation. This is a building that has no designation unto itself. It's how it impacts the district. As part of creating that district, the analysis that was done and the report for that looked at every single building in the Heritage District and identified the characteristics that gave it its heritage, or what it added to the district. I will note that the brickwork is not identified explicitly on this building as one of its heritage features that makes it special. But
the report,
but in terms of overall, the district is characterized by lots of brick on all the facades.
There's a lot about brickwork in the
Yes.
heritage document.
And that is again, we're dealing with something that is a bit of a social science here. So there is interpretation, and that's why we come before council to help
But
us
to
with
come
that.
back to my question, really, if we do not approve the heritage permit, we're just, blowing off steam.
So as Rob says, conundrum is a great word for this one, I think. My feeling would be that if council does not want to approve this permit, rather than just voting this recommendation down, because if we vote it down, it just basically doesn't exist. And yes, the permit is denied, but if the work's already happened, well, what does it matter that the permit's denied?
Exactly.
So if you don't want to approve this permit, then I would suggest that somebody makes an amendment to the motion to say, deny the heritage permit and direct staff to fully enforce previous permits to ensure that the terms of those permits is met, or something along those lines, because then at least it takes an action. Whereas, yes, I think you are not far from the reality of, if we just say no, but then don't do anything about it, then what makes somebody come and ask for one of these again? But it's really messy.
Even I'm going to just suggest we have another case where we issued a heritage permit for a house on Collingwood Street, and we were shown plans for the house, and really what was built was 100% different.
I think the other thing that Rob and I have been talking about with relation to this is that obviously we are still working on an update to the Heritage Conservation District plan, and when that comes forward, my intent is that our recommendation should include the fact that the council asks us to actively enforce heritage permits as opposed to reactively enforce heritage permits, because again, as has been said a number of times, if we're going to care about this, we should care about it. Now that if we do that with new applications, that's much easier, because then you're making sure that the terms of the heritage permits are being met whilst it's happening, and you can have somebody go on site while the construction is happening and make sure it's all being done right. Where this one becomes really difficult is the fact that it has been going on for so long, has been done in phases, the work has been completed, and retroactively enforcing it will be really tricky, and I suspect it would be quite expensive for the municipality.
Mr. Voigt?
Through your worship, again, I just pulled something else up here, and I was looking at agreements of the possibility of that. So under the Heritage Act, a municipality can pass a bylaw, and this again, I'm thinking in terms of future actions, entering into a heritage easement with a heritage property owner. And the agreement sets out the requirements for maintaining the property or a specific heritage feature, as well as requiring the property to be properly insured. I think if we are looking at how do we move forward, and then also in the update on the heritage plan, that perhaps with these applications, one of the requirements is that if it's approved, that you need to enter an agreement with the municipality accordingly, which again may give us more leverage in the future to make sure it happens. Again, I'm just trying to respond to the question in terms of your concerns about future implications on where this decision on this application might take us. One other note I'll mention, and it's not an active file, so I'm comfortable doing this. You know, we know that there was, because it was even openly mentioned here in council, there was an issue with not getting a heritage permit for the fire hall work. Right, the owner came in and started doing all the work up front and had a stop work order put on it, because not only did they not meet didn't get a heritage application, they also hadn't had building permits at the time. That stop work order happened. We had that enforcement, and the owner more than happily then after that moved forward to make sure that that was being done appropriately. So we have used the tools we have. Question is, if someone completely ignores it, then what? And I don't have answers for that.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner. So since the start of this project, the plans changed several times. Were these plans brought to the building department or planning department and passed on the changes to what he done?
Through your worship, so the building department does not enforce heritage requirements. There were times when changes were made, and the building official had to ask, for example, to have interior wall finishes removed so they could see the work that was done. So again, not a a typical approach to doing your building inspections, but also not uncommon. People get ahead of the game and the building official needs to see what's been done. There was also a number of requirements to get a bunch of additional drawings submitted from engineers and that, because the changes that had been made were not meeting the plans. So there was some contravention of the plans, even from a building permit application perspective, but changes that would have been reflective of the previously approved heritage permits is not something the building official checks on. They run adjacent to each other and it can be problematic. But yes, there was changes, and a number of times the applicant was forced to provide additional information to meet building permit requirements.
Correct. So what I'm saying is he changed from a 2-story addition to a 1-story and added a deck instead of the addition, but that was all put through planning or building and passed.
Yes, the deck as such didn't require a building permit or like the things I was just referring to were structural things inside of the building and that. But yes, everything from that perspective is sound, if you will.
That's where I'm going with that, with this, is because he followed the rules of the building and planning department to finish this project. I'm going to apologize to the Heritage Committee and to some of council right now, because I see it different. I was once tried to force heritage on me. I fought it and I won. I don't agree with it 100%. And right now, the building from the front, the facade is the same. And I don't see why we would force the man to change it as we go forward now, because he went into the building department, planning department. He changed the plans. It was approved. He's done it. It's finished. And I would be against forcing to redo it. Thank you.
I think Councillor Greenfield was next.
Thanks, Your Worship. Sitting on the Heritage Committee, I really wanted to listen to my fellow council members and staff concerning this issue. I guess it, in my estimation, that it's only one issue, but it's a very important situation. We do have a designated heritage area. With that comes some regulations and some restrictions. And it's not just in the municipality of Meaford, this is throughout the province that this exists. I actually see this as a much bigger question than just one particular property. If we are going to have a designated heritage area in our urban area or municipality in total, there are rules, there are obligations that are expected to be taken on. And if we start slacking off on the rules and regulations and saying, well, yeah, this didn't happen or that did happen, I'm afraid it's going to greatly erode our heritage area. And in the future, if we have too many circumstances like this, the question is going to be out there, well, why have you got a heritage area at all if you're not going to promote it and stand by it? Heritage in many Ontario Canadian towns has been a huge tourist draw. It's been a huge economic advantage. And I guess, as I say, this is a bigger question than just one property. To me, this opens the door. Are we gonna stand by our heritage area in our municipality? Are we going to just say, well, go ahead, do what you want? I do give the owner of this property credit. He has invested a lot of money in these renovations, and I give him, I thank him for that. I respect him for that. But on the other hand, the rules, the regulations are there, and if we're not going to stand by them, stand behind them, support them, it's a bit of a farce. We need to do better.
Deputy Mayor?
Your worship, thank you for the opportunity to speak again on this. And as I'm looking at Councillor Greenfield, I'm also looking at our coat of arms on the wall and being reminded that it is our future, our heritage, thanks to Councillor Bell. So I do agree with yourself, Councillor Greenfield, and with the comments from Councillor Forder. Well said. I think it's time that we stood up here and supported our Heritage Committee and recognized that that this particular project has not gone the way that it was suggested to go. And I'm going to ask you, Mr. Smith, to please reread the amendment that you had brought before us, because I think I would like to move it. But I just want to know before we do that, how far we're going to go with requiring these changes. If we talked about the windows that were supposed to be white and they're black, so are we going to require those to be painted or replaced, or, how far do we go?
You tell me. Genuinely, I think if you want to put forward a motion talking about enforcing the provisions of previous heritage permits, I think you need to tell us what those provisions that you want to enforce are. If it's everything, that's fine, but if it's not, then that is easier to do, or we should at least be clear about it. Rob, I think.
Through your worship, the only thing I'll note, and again, bit of a, I'm going to refer to the quagmire now on this one. So yes, in the previous iterations of this, there were references to color that had moved forward. I will say, if that's the case and you're referring to that, that's 100% your purview. I will note we do not have heritage colors defined in our heritage plan. This comes up often with the committee. It's not a thing. So I would suggest, unless you're referencing that previously in this application, it was mentioned to be white, not black, etc., that is probably defensible. Again, not a lawyer, but if it was just, well, this is now that what we want to do, there is no grounds for that in our heritage plan whatsoever.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor. A question for the clerk. What I heard from Councillor Bartley talking with Mr. Voigt about the building department, I gleaned from that at this point, there is a disconnect that the building department, I think it was clearly stated, does not enforce the heritage. Please correct me if I got that wrong. I'm thinking as a policy, we should have a new policy that specifically says to the building department in a heritage district, part of your mandate will be the enforcement of the Heritage Act. And if we need to do that, I'd like to bring that forward.
So, yes, you're correct that the building department has not been enforcing the Heritage Act. I think one of the things that Rob and I have talked a significant amount about with the team, particularly related to this case, is that we need to do a far better job at linking heritage permits with whatever else is happening on that property. Because in the vast majority of cases, if you need a heritage permit, you'll probably need a building permit. Not always, but most of the time. In terms of whether it's the building department or whether it's our enforcement team that would do the enforcing, I would want to go away and have a look at that, because building inspectors have a lot of authority under the building code and are often appointed as provincial offences officers, but not always. And I don't think we've appointed all of our building officials as that, but we do have that for our enforcement team. So that's just a logistical nicety, really. But I think that as I say, we plan to bring some of that forward when we do bring the updated plan. Just sort of going back to this file, particularly to the Deputy Mayor's question, your other option, I think, and I am thinking as we go here, is that you make an amendment that doesn't say decline this permit. It says approve this permit, making the brick go back on. And then your amendment could be and add a clause that says direct staff to enforce this permit to the full extent. Because then it's focused on this permit rather than, because technically, and again, I'm going to look at my planning people who will remember this better. Technically, if we don't pass this permit, then we haven't got a permit that says the brick's got to be on there.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Worship. I apologize because I feel like the more we add, we're making it less clear. However, I just got an email. I don't know, see in the, oh, there we go. See? So, Jim Sullivan, who you know as part of the Heritage Committee, he had a conversation with the person that we use municipally as our trainer for all things heritage. You met with him when we had that one day session. So from Bert, he identified that in an information request that Jim had initiated, that the Heritage Conservation District is identified in the building code as applicable law. So that says that yes, the building officials need to look at that in regards to the denial of a construction permit as provided. So when a permit comes forward, he needs, in this case, our Bart needs to look at that. But now we get into if someone's not following the heritage part of it, does the enforcement fall to the building official? And our understanding so far is that that is not. So yes, Bert would look at it and go, oh, good, your plan meets the heritage permit. But once it starts going sideways, I think this is where we are in some new territory on the enforcement part of it.
And there is no other, part of our organization, our corporation that can deal with this unless you're thinking in terms of bylaw.
It's either bylaw or, again, in this, so we know for sure bylaw would deal with enforcement on all things, Heritage Act contravention. But once it enters this kind of merging of you had a building permit that was using plans related to a heritage permit, and then you ignore the heritage permit part. This is where we would need clarity. I do not, and I think Bart's analysis right now is he cannot do a stop work order on Heritage Act contravention. He can do it on building permit stuff. So once someone goes astray, it's hard for us to understand that right now.
So we need some motions. It doesn't have to be today, but we need some motions that clean this up.
So the other thing that we could do is there is no particular requirement that this has to be passed today. So council could defer this. And because I think from everything that we've just been talking about, particularly Rob's last comment, I want a lawyer to weigh in on this, to tell us what we can and can't do and who is supposed to do it, particularly in a case like something where it is in effect going backwards to something that's already been done. So if council deferred this, hopefully to the next meeting, but a worse one afterwards, we at least could find a heritage specialist lawyer and get their input on this, because we want to give you the right advice, and I don't think either of us feel confident that we can do that at this stage. If we want to look at enforcement stuff, if you don't want to look at enforcement stuff, then you can pass it. But I think if that's what you want,
we definitely do, because that's where our problem lies here. Without enforcement, we are giving away the store or the farm or both. So can we get a go ahead, Deputy Mayor?
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and I support that. And I just want to clarify then, should council agree to do as Mr. Smith has just suggested and secure a legal opinion, that means Mr. Utterbridge cannot do anything. He's basically got no permit. He can't go forward and put siding on the back or anything of that nature in the meantime.
Your worship, that's kind of where he's at now. He's already, so this would be about removing the siding and replacing it with the brick. I think he just gets kind of stuck in his world of moving this forward. But I can't imagine there's anything else that would be outstanding that he would be working on and work past this.
So, you just need a motion then to defer, this,
If that's what we'd like to do, yes.
Do I have a mover for that? I'm gonna take Councillor Greenfield as the mover and Deputy Mayor as seconder. All in favor? And we have effectively dealt with this for today, and hopefully we will tidy it up soon. Thank you very much for your help, everyone. The next on the agenda is the award for tender Harbor D-Dock. The recommendation is that Council of the Municipality of Meaford, 1, approve the award of tender 2023-10 Harbor D-Dock replacement to Croft Industrial at the cost of $300,660.10, including the municipality's non-refundable allocation of HST. 2, authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into the necessary agreement. And 3, direct staff to include a 5% price increase in the 2024 fees and charges bylaw and to include similar price rises in 2025 and 2026. I have a mover and seconder for this, a move by Councillor Forder, seconded by Councillor Uhrig. Discussion. Sorry, Councillor Forder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in the report, this payment plan will mean that no significant capital projects can take place at the harbor in 2025 and 2026, as all revenue will be used to pay for D-Dock. So I would just like to know, are there any other harbor capital projects that might be affected by this decision?
Maybe, I think is the answer. The river docks are scheduled to be replaced at some stage in the next couple of years. In fact, before we had the problem with D-Dock last year, the river docks were scheduled to be replaced before D-Dock. There is the potential that at some point we need to deal with the fuel system that's currently at Richardson's, but if Richardson's want to stop, we would need to replace that as well. And we'd have some money for that, but not probably enough. So possibly, I think is the answer.
And in the same breath, maybe not. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. And I think we feel fairly confident that that won't happen, but you can't know for sure.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. And on the same thing, this doesn't affect the patio and whatnot that it's going to be done down there in this year's budget.
No, and the reason why this is a little more complicated than we'd intended is because we've tried to do this in such a way that the projects that are proposed in the 2024 budget that you've received today are also part of the budget. So that's why there's very little money in from the 2024 going towards this right now.
Councillor Bell.
Mr. Mayor, page 400, says grants from Canada, long-term debt and the total funding. This is not really long-term debt, is it? This is short-term debt. Why did we not put short-term debt?
Do you want the real reason or the silly reason?
Because it's short-term debt.
It is short-term debt. It was always intended to be short-term debt. The real reason is that we missed that and didn't see it last year. The silly reason is that we don't have a code in the financial system for short-term debt.
Oh, we need a code.
So it got labeled as long-term debt because that was the only one that said debt.
Okay, Councillor Bartley.
And on this, are we financing it internally or are we going to the bank?
Our intent was always to finance it internally, so
Thank you.
and we're trying not to call it debt either in that, because then even if we do a formal internal debt, we have to charge that to our debt capacity, but we'll just call it unfinanced for now and hope the auditors don't get too upset.
Okay, are we ready to vote on this? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And finally, item E, donation of marine artifacts. The recommendation is that Council of the Municipality of Meaford, 1, direct staff to inform the donor that the municipality will not conduct recovery work on private property, and 2, subject to the donation taking place, direct staff to include a reserve transfer of $30,000 from the museum reserve in the 2024 budget for the storage and installation of the donated artifacts. Mover and seconder, moved by Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Urick. Discussion, Councillor Bell.
Thanks once again, Mr. Mayor. I find the number that was presented here to be very reasonable. I also think it's a very reasonable statement that we are not going to get involved in taking articles away from anybody's property. Those of us that have been down there and looked at that with the concrete that's been poured and the structures that are up, my opinion is you're going to be looking at least mini high hose to get this stuff off of there. The lawn would be torn up, the concrete would be a mess. Let's not go there. So I agree fully that we're not going to get involved in taking these things away. And I think that the number that was presented is a solid number. So thank you. I support this.
Councillor Forder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. And yes, Tony, I agree with you. So I just have some questions with regards to the actual artifacts. You know, everybody's driven by that a million times, but how valuable are these maritime artifacts to Meaford? So like, what is their significance? And is the cost justified without having this information, considering it'll maybe cost around $40,000 for this project? I'm not against it. I just want to understand what these artifacts, what their significance is to Meaford.
I think it's an excellent question. We have not had an external third party look at this. Our museum team have looked at them and do believe that they have value to the history of Meaford. They are predominantly from a boat called the Spume, and I suspect that Mayor Kentner, at least, and probably Councillor Greenfield can probably tell you more about the Spume than I can. But we do have an exhibit about that boat in the museum. Certainly, whether it's there now or we have had it, I'm not sure. I can't put a monetary value on them because, to be honest, that 30,000 does include some money for some restoration, but it may not include all the money we would need to restore them because they're not in pristine condition. And obviously, if we want to display stuff, we would want to make sure that they look the best they possibly can.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. So do we have a spot in mind where we would put these things in the future, or are we going to store them for 20 years?
So my thought, and it is just my thought, I think the last motion the council passed said bring back a plan to council of where we would do it. My thought is that it should be somewhere at the harbour, but I don't really want to commit to where at the harbour until we have the design work done from the harbour master plan, which I am expecting soon from the consultants who are working on that, because then at least we could mesh it all together.
Councillor Greenfield, I saw your hand up. And I hope that you can contribute some information to educate those in the room about the history of this material.
Well, my only experience with marine artifacts was when I was a pirate. So I don't know if I should go any further on that. First,
this is the first time I have seen Councillor Bartley break up.
Where was I? And no, I'm not going to divulge where I buried the treasure on Oak Island either. Anyway, moving right along. First of all, I think it's a great idea that we do not conduct these recoveries. Having known Captain Shepherd a little bit, I know when he did things very well. Yeah, there's concrete there, and I think some of the number of the artifacts are illuminated or has lights, so that means there must be underground wiring there someplace, and that maybe we should stay away from that. Councillor Ford asked a very good question. I guess, and Councillor Bartley too, how are we going to fit these in with the harbor master plan? I think, I don't think it's gonna be at the harbor, the obvious place to put them, but I really wonder. We have to look at this from all angles, and it's not just commemorating the history of Meaford Harbor. To me, this is the entire Georgian Bay, or all Great Lake shipping, which Captain Shepherd was definitely involved in. So we should do this, but I'm a little reluctant to do this, as to just unless we have a space designated. I don't think it will take up a lot of area. The other question is, are there items here that we're not going to use for some reason? So I'll vote in favor of doing this, but I think there are some unanswered questions as of yet.
Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll agree with fellow councilors that, yeah, I don't want any part of restoration of the property. That shouldn't be our responsibility. I strongly believe that. Having said that, I strongly believe that materials like this, I don't know what the harbor plan is going to be. Nobody does. But if we were going to go out and try and secure items, they're going to cost more than $30,000. This is an opportunity for get something that already exists. I'm obviously big on economic development and tourism. This is a chance for us to try and do something for $30,000 to actually spruce up our harbor a little bit and put around things that are of possible interest. Because the last time I checked, we're not going to spend $1 million in the harbor and refurbish it anytime soon. This is an opportunity for $30,000 to try and put something in short term. Well, I know $30,000 to get it, it's going to cost a little more to refurbish it and do whatever. It's going to be far short of $1 million to try and kind of gussy up the harbor as it is. So to me, this is an opportunity to take something that exists, that's being donated to us, that we don't have to purchase, that we can utilize to help at least do something at the harbor now. Not sure what that's going to look like, but.
And if I could just add to that, I think we're losing sight of the fact that this donation this collection was put together by one of the most celebrated Great Lakes captains of modern times. People in Meaford don't know their own heroes. And this gentleman, as I said, has put together, curated a very significant collection of Great Lakes materials. And we have got literally, I want to say, acres at the harbor. It shouldn't be a problem to find a spot. And in fact, he was instrumental in providing the one ship that we do have on chocks in the harbor, which is a significant tourist attraction. So that would be the general area, for a display of that kind. And yeah, it's unfortunate that they're looking to recover the costs of remediating the property, but I agree that's not our job.
I think the one wrinkle that I'll add is if we don't go and take the things and claim, go and do the work on the property ourselves, I can't guarantee that the donation will go ahead.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in the report, the section that states the timing of the work in terms of the real estate transaction and whether the municipality would take on liability if the real estate transaction was not completed because of the removal of artifacts wasn't completed on time. Just want to know what our level of risk here is, and are we confident? How do we protect the corporation is what I'm trying to get at here. Any advice from senior staff would be wonderful.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm coming up with some facetious answers today, but that's why we're here. Because I think for senior staff, we've been a bit confused about how to deal with this and what our liability is and so on, as to how best to move this forward or whether to move it forward. It is my impression, and I have not been told this specifically, but that the sale is due to finish by the end of January. I think the chances of, even if we were willing to go on to that property, the chances of us getting that done by the end of January are pretty limited. And I am told by the purchasers of the property, or at least relatives of the purchasers of the property, that it is a condition of sale that everything is removed and the property is remediated. I don't see how that can happen by January, whoever's doing it, to be honest. Council has passed a resolution to say that we would like to accept the donation. I don't think that leaves us open to any legal liability, though I am not an expert, as I always say, because we did that without knowing some of the costs involved, and just saying you'll take a donation, it kind of has to be a donation, not a purchase. So I think if council declines at this point, we're probably okay. But I think if council wanted us to go and get it ourselves, then we're probably not okay, because I just don't see how we can.
Councillor Yuri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as with previous conversations, does this not then rely on legal counsel to a degree? Because this gentleman has literally donated this to the municipality. So the legal ramification of that in conjunction with the real estate sale is going to have to come from a legal opinion, not from our guessing.
It certainly could, if you want to go down that path. I may be splitting hairs, but I don't think it's a donation when it's not something that physically can be handed over. But yes, I mean, we could go and get a legal opinion. We're not going to get one of those before the house sale is due to go through and make a decision on that. So this is a really, really uncomfortable one. I don't even want to tell you how many hours staff have spent trying to figure this out over the last 3 to 4 weeks. It's a lot. We don't have a good answer. This was our best guess at a decent answer, but it's certainly not one that's going to make anybody happy. Because as I say, I could foresee the property owner saying, well, if you're not going to come and do it for me, then I'm just going to take it all to the dump and be done with it. And equally, we have major concerns about us being responsible for getting this stuff. I'm led to believe that at least the buoy is, in 12 feet of concrete. That's not something that's easily removed, and certainly not cleanup of that is easily done. So yeah, this is tricky and uncomfortable.
Councillor Yuri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I will say is the broad definition of a donation doesn't say it's something that can literally be handed over. It is specifically, whether it's money, alms, services, goods, clothing, that is given in good faith by somebody to a public organization, whatever. So it's not like that's a donation. That isn't.
I think the key phrase there is probably in good faith, because is it possible to accept?
Well, I heard personally from the real estate agent that was involved, and he was assuring me that this wasn't going to be a problem. I tried to reach out to him all last week and had no success, so I will redouble my efforts and see if I can have a conversation with him and get a clearer understanding of whether that's what you're telling us is.
So we have heard from the real estate agent repeatedly. Every request is what date are you coming to take this
Okay,
stuff away?
no. That's why he's not talking to me.
No, not too much of a comment, really, Your Worship. Thank you. Just thinking of the date and, what kind of date do we put to this? Because obviously we can't do this in time for the closing, so we have to pick a date and that'll have to get worked into the offer with an acceptance of it'll be, 1st of May or whatever's feasible, depending on how the winter turns out.
I don't think it is up to us to set a date if we are not the people going to retrieve the items. If we're the only way we can set a date that we will do something by is if we're going to be the people doing it. And if council wants us to, we will, but we strongly feel that we should not be going and doing that.
I'm happy to approve the motion as it stands. You want to call the vote then? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I need a motion to go into committee of the whole. We've got 35 minutes until our next meeting. Moved by Councillor Forder, seconded by Councillor Bell. And the first item here is that Committee of the Whole receive report CAO 2024-02 Council Priorities Update January 2024 for information purposes. This is our update on the projects. Thank you for that. Any comments on it? Questions? Oh, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to talk about the part that references following the success of the council priority open house in November, staff propose holding a similar event annually to allow public to ask questions. I think that's a phenomenal idea. I just wanted to thank staff for bringing that forward. I also wanted to look at the Ontario Pump Storage. So what is the timeline leading to the formation of the Community Advisory Committee, please?
I am very much hoping that when we sit here in 2 weeks' time, we'll have the terms of reference for that. They are basically ready to go, but we were holding off while we tried to deal with a couple of other things related to the project. But I think we should be able to have that come forward next time. We will, and then we'll be recruiting, as soon as we possibly can for both that and hopefully the other advisory committees as well, because I'm hoping that we can do all fairly similar timelines.
Anything else? All in favor of receiving the report? That's carried. Thank you. Next is the item B, the Committee of the Whole directs staff to bring the draft fees and charges forward at a statutory public meeting prior to council's final consideration of the 2024 fees and charges bylaw. Need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Bartley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Keaveney. So this is just in the nick of time.
Yes, I mean the resolution here is a bit of a preemptive one because it just is what we've normally said. But yes, we of course have the fees and charges public meeting in 33 minutes. So we can either just sort of accept this as it is and then have the public meeting and then deal with any amendments at the bylaw stage in 2 weeks' time. Or if there's things that you want to change now, we can change them now and then we can just have a simple bylaw in 2 weeks' time. Whatever council wants to do, really. Or if there's specific questions, then between us, we should be able to answer them for all of the schedules.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner. This is basically saying you're going to bring a thing forward. I have questions, but they can be answered tonight. I would just accept you bringing it forward. And accept it, and then we can discuss things this evening.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? It's carried. Item C, mutual aid and assistance agreement for an Ontario Water and Wastewater Agency Response Network. The recommendation that Committee of the Whole recommend Council of the Municipality of Meaford authorize the execution of an agreement with the Ontario Water/Wastewater Agency Response Network, ONWARM. Mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Forder, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Discussion of this. Councillor Bell.
Kind of, Mr. Mayor, like what is this? Because it's talking about the water and it's using words like mutual aid and it's got nothing to do with what I'm accustomed what the word mutual aid kind of means. So I read it and it's about the water that gets used. Can I have a little bit more info, please?
For sure, through you, Matt, or Mr. Mayor, Onwarn is kind of the water wastewater club of all Ontario municipalities. The point of the organization is that if something happens, whether it's here or wherever, if you're a member, they can request aid, whether it be parts and material or staff or whatever the case might be, from any of the members who are able and willing. And anyone can contribute to that mutual aid as well. So really, it's kind of formalizing what happens now, to be completely honest with you. We have through the Johnny B's incident, like we had a really good relationship with our neighbors. They had vials we didn't have, you know, like we were able to work together that way. This formalizes that type of relationship with all municipalities in Ontario. That if we ever needed something that maybe our neighbors didn't have, but someone else did, or if, I hope we never have to, but if something big happens and we require a lot of person power or whatever the case might be, but it also formalizes a way to get paid back for that. So whether it be you give back whatever the thing is you borrowed, or if there's a way to pay for services, like there's a formalized mechanism within this organization to make sure that everyone gets what they put in back. And you also don't have to take part. So maybe something happens and we don't have the thing someone's looking for, or we're also having an issue and we don't have staff that we can provide. That's okay too. It's really just whenever a circumstance takes place in the water wastewater world, there's people there to support you through it, really.
And I think our favorite word, liability, if we're entered into an agreement as part of this organization, then we have coverage if we're helping other people and they have coverage if they're helping us. Whereas if it's kind of just done out of the goodness of everybody's heart, then that liability question gets a bit more complicated.
Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see you've said that town of Blue Mountains, town of Collingwood, municipality Grey Highlands were already involved. The other municipalities in Grey are not. So in order for this to actually work, would they not have to be kind of like we would do this with Collingwood and Blue Mountains, Grey Highlands, but we wouldn't have an agreement with Chatsworth because they're not involved. So this is just kind of tagging in with whoever has it.
You ready to vote on this? All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Great. Now, updates from County Council, committees and local boards. So I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Keaveney for a County Council report.
Thanks, Your Worship. And County Council has met twice since we last met, so I'll try to condense the two meetings and just share the important points. On December the 14th, Councillor Tom Allwood from Grey Highlands spoke as chair of the Multi-Energy Working Group. And he came to talk about better battery energy storage systems. Through the presentation, we learned about the risks associated with these in the opinion of the committee. And those included potential fire hazards and dangerous chemical emissions should a fire erupt. There was considerable discussion about this at county, and we learned the fire marshal is expected to release recommendations within the next 6 months. Municipalities were advised to be cognizant of setback requirements, emergency response requirements, source water supplies for emergency situations, limits to noise emissions, decommissioning guidelines, and a process for change of ownership. And this was important to us because, of course, we have the one out on the edge of our municipality, right on the edge of us and the city of Owen Sound, which we did supply a letter of support for. So just know that we are following this and there will be discussion on it tomorrow at the ITFD board meeting as well. Correspondence included a request for continuing funding for Grey Ag Services at the county, which council agreed to in the amount of $69,000. The 2024 committee appointments were announced and supported. I'll continue on the Agricultural Advisory Committee, the CAO Performance Review Committee, Long-Term Care Committee of Management, and the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee. Mayor Kentner will continue on the Community Services Committee. There's also a new Budget and Finance Committee that has been formed at the county. County is going to review their land acknowledgement policy, and they're feeling that the wording just isn't as appropriate or as meaningful as it could be. So it'll be interesting to see where we land with that. This past Thursday, January the 11th, was a really short agenda, but an interesting one. Dr. Martha Rogers and Peter French delivered a presentation on road safety. They advocate with a desire for councils to consider a more person-centered approach rather than prioritizing vehicles and road design. The Vision Zero concept, which began 30 years ago in Sweden, is really focused on increased speed and growing numbers of vehicles on the roads. Presenters spoke to their research in complete streets for rural communities. Change takes time, but the thinking is that Vision Zero principles be incorporated into road projects going forward. Last year alone, there were 10,000 fatalities on our roads in Canada. 14 road-related deaths happened in Grey County. Canada's road safety strategy document suggests that being safe on our roadways is a human right. Collaboration, partnerships, evidence-based knowledge, and leadership are necessary to make change, along with enhanced enforcement strategies. Sweden has reduced their road fatality rate by 66% since implementing Vision Zero. So council did support a request to go forward and ask for a report from staff to understand how many of these strategies are already currently being incorporated into road design, traffic calming measures, bike lanes, and so on. So I suspect that'll be an interesting document, which we'll talk about again here at this table in terms of what we're doing here in relation to Vision Zero concepts. The paramedic deployment review suggested a paramedic base be created in Durham. The location is going to be adjacent to the new West Grey Police Station at Chester Street and Grey Road 4. The site will consist of 4 ambulance bays, office space, and storage. This location is near their hospital. And Grey County is working towards a standardized paramedic base design for consistency and financial efficiency as time goes forward. The new base will be energy efficient, conscious of the county's goal to reach net zero by 2045. And if anybody has any questions, then happy to take those, or if you have anything to add, Your Worship, please go ahead.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First of all, congratulations to you and the mayor for your assignments over the county. Good stuff. I'm just wondering about this report from the Deputy Mayor of Grey Highlands. I know Deputy Mayor Greg got in on this too. About the fires, the battery storage fires. Was this just basically an FYI, or is there any reason? Have there been any history of these storages? And I know this is fairly new. I'm just wondering, because certainly you mentioned ITFD would be called immediately. I can see if the fire was serious enough, our Meaford Fire Department would could get in on this too. So is there any or what degree of alarm is necessary here, or is it just good to know the potential of what could happen?
And through Your Worship to Councillor Greenfield, I think at this point it's information. It was really good education. County Council took all of this very seriously. I know Mr. Smith will want to speak to this, but in talking with our own fire chief, I think the understanding at this point is, should this project go forward and should there be a fire, that they just let it burn. It's where we really need to see what these recommendations are from the fire marshal. I think before really understanding what requirements as a municipality we might need to make going forward. But we do know that these storage facilities are encouraged by ISO. That's mentioned in the minister's letter in relation to DC Energy. This dim green light going forward. But knowing that some of us will be at Roma this week and there will be a trade show, it's certainly a question that I intend to ask at the ISO booth and the Firemark booth, and if the fire marshal's there, to get as much information as I can glean when I'm down there, because I think we need a better understanding of what these concerns might be for us.
Are any other boards or committees that met? Councillor Urick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Grace Harbor Conservation Authority met on Tuesday, December 19th. And as it was the last meeting before Christmas, we had a wonderful dinner and opportunity to visit with the GSEA board and staff at the Stone Tree Golf Club. We had a presentation on the various GSEA water management programs, such as dams, flood forecasting, and watershed monitoring. Particularly impressive were the culvert flow and fish data gathering, long-term chloride level monitoring, and flood forecasting methods. Hopefully, staff utilize some of the valuable weather monitoring tools available on the GSEA website. Secondly, the Climate Resilient Coastal Communities Grant now has a value of over $900,000, and our municipal buy-in, should the application be successful, is only expected to be $15,000 over 3 years. All the municipalities in Grey counties, the counties, SON, and the Toronto Metropolitan University have provided letters of support, and GSAA is expecting one from Meaford as well. Hopefully that's already happened or is in the process thereof. Thank you. And finally, the GSEA board accepted the proposed budget, which represented a 4.7% increase, or approximately 10.5 thousand for Meaford.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if I could, I've got the 24th down for the AGM, and I wondered if, you were looking for Shirley and I, or one of us, to attend anyway. I have marked it down tentatively.
You would certainly be welcome, yes.
I think that you have a meeting that starts at 3:15, but one could go for the annual GM. Correct. Okay. Any other? Yes, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. The deputy mayor and I attended the ITFD meeting 3 or 4 weeks ago. It was all on budget. And I know there's certain things you're not supposed to touch: libraries, Grace Harbor Conservation, fire departments. We touched fire department. I wasn't happy with the budget, and we're going back to kick the can again tomorrow. I don't want to hurt the way they fight fires, but to me, it was way out of line. So we're going back tomorrow to go over it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other reports to hear? Okay, moving right along. Much paper. I think we're ready to move out of committee of the whole. Mover and seconder. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Urick, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Councillor motions. I think we have a recommendation. Yeah, sorry. Are there any notices of motion at this time? Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Per earlier conversation, yes, I actually spoke with Jessica during the break. So what I would like to ask is bring a notice of motion that I would like to see a report on the financial impact that would be what would result in lessening the amount required for snow removal in the downtown core. Obviously, with it's a El Nino year we discussed, and the impact this year is not as apparent, but in heavy years, that would take away from other snow removal or plowing activity. So there is going to be a broad impact. So I think we need to see a report on that, on what that would look like. Thank you.
Now, no other notices of motion. I think the deputy mayor has a motion for decision. Do we need a seconder for her motion? Yes. So seconded by Councillor Greenfield. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And the motion is short, so I'll quickly read it. The recommendation: whereas Council of the Municipality of Meaford has enacted a municipal investment policy, whereas said policy limits the percentage of reserves that the municipality can invest in guaranteed investment certificates, GICs, and whereas GIC interest rates are currently among the best available to the municipality, therefore be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford hereby directs staff to bring forward a revised municipal investment policy which permits a higher proportion of reserves to be invested in GICs. And we learned this through discussion at our last meeting when Val was speaking to this and talking about the amount. I believe it's 4 million that you can currently invest. Is that correct?
It might be a little lower now, but
Yeah.
there is some that we can invest.
Okay, so that's really all that we're asking is to give Val permission to invest, I guess, whatever she sees fit in GICs with the market being favorable as it is.
Any discussion? Councillor Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just assuming that that number is 4 million, what percentage of our total reserves does that reflect?
So currently, I believe our policy states that we can invest 50% in GICs. 50%. But I believe that if we up that to 75%, at least we have some leeway to change around what we're doing currently. We can invest, I think it's 15% in one fund, and it's not doing very well.
Any other questions? Ready to vote? All in favor? That's carried. Excellent. Next is a recommendation to adopt the minutes of the council meetings held on November 27, December 4, and December 11, and the closed meeting held on December 11, 2023. Need a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Urick. All in favor? That's carried. Communications. Is there anything on the communications file that you want to discuss? Councillor Urick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a quick question. Items 23 and 26 both just touched on the cemetery's abandonment issue and just some of the implications that resulted to the municipality, some of the responsibilities, potential costs. And I just wondered whether that was a potential issue for our municipality at all?
It's not an issue, but it's also not anything that I think makes any sense in pursuing. We do have to, under law, take on abandoned cemeteries. We have done that with a number around the municipality, tucked away old settler cemeteries and so on. The bigger issue may come when, as and when the Bognor Cemetery and McLean Cemetery, the board there doesn't want to run that anymore, and that's an active cemetery, so that would take more resources. The reason I say I'm not sure it's worth pursuing is because I cannot see any world in which the provincial government suddenly takes over maintenance or abandoned cemeteries. Somebody's got to do it, and they're not going to hire grass cutters to go and do that.
Right, and I agree with all that. My thought is always, and I know takes up staff time just to literally support these motions from other municipalities, but if we're not pushing the government to try and do something, then to that end, I would sort of like to support their motions just to try and get the province to move somewhat on it.
I think my philosophy on those, and I don't disagree, is that pick and choose the moments for that. And in my opinion, we should save our powder for something that's more significant.
Okay. Is that everything? Nothing further on communications? Then I'm ready to entertain a motion that we adjourn. Moved and seconded, all in favor, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes.